A bitter wind howled across the slopes of the Rocky Mountains that October afternoon, carrying with it an unseasonable snowfall. Maya Collins pulled her heavy wool cap tighter over her head, silently cursing the sudden turn in weather. She had just finished guiding a small group of tourists back down the safest route, bidding them farewell at the trailhead. Now, alone and battling near zero visibility, she carefully picked her way along the narrow path that led to her secluded cabin. The air felt sharper than usual, and each gust of wind stung her cheeks, as if winter had arrived early, uninvited. As she approached a bend in the trail, Maya caught sight of something that looked out of place in the swirling white flakes. She froze, heart thumping, and narrowed her eyes to focus. It was a dark shape, partially buried in the snow. Her pulse kicked up. The mere thought that someone might be stranded out here made her stomach lurch. Years of guiding and countless hours spent in these mountains had honed her instincts. She knew the difference between a simple log and a human figure. And this was definitely the latter. Clutching the sturdy pole she used as a walking stick, Maya trudged forward and knelt beside the form. It was a man, his hair dusted with snow, face pale from the cold, and a bleeding gash on his forehead. The angle of his leg looked wrong, and she feared it might be broken. Quickly, she pressed 2 fingers to his neck, relieved to find a faint but steady pulse. The shock of seeing him out here, alone and injured, made her mouth go dry. She scanned the area, searching for any sign of companions or equipment, but there was only the relentless whirling of the storm. Maya muttered under her breath, "Hang on, buddy," and pulled off her gloves to inspect the wound on his temple more closely. Blood stained the snow where he lay, and his skin felt ice cold. She had neither the time nor the proper supplies to treat him on the spot. With the storm intensifying, he could easily freeze to death if she didn't act fast. She had to get him to her cabin, no easy feat given his size. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and clearly not in any condition to help himself. Summoning strength born from her years of physical labor in the mountains, Maya began the arduous process of lifting him onto an improvised sled made from a tarpaulin in her backpack. Sweat trickled down her brow despite the cold. She gritted her teeth, the memory of having lugged heavy supplies up and down these trails serving as a reminder that she could manage more than she believed. The journey was grueling. Wind whipped at her face, and the snow underfoot made every step a battle. She paused several times to catch her breath and check the man's pulse. He was still unconscious, his lips parted slightly as if he might gasp awake at any moment. Whenever she felt her energy wane, she thought about how fragile life could be in these mountains. Too many visitors underestimated the merciless climate, and though she didn't know this stranger's name, she refused to let him become another cautionary tale. At last, Maya spotted the outline of her cabin through the swirling flakes. The building was modest, a single-story structure crafted from weathered logs, perched on a patch of cleared land just off the main trail. It was humble, but it was home. In some ways, it was also her refuge, a place she had retreated to after her heartbreak with David, the photographer who had left her for a lucrative career in Los Angeles. Memories of that abandonment still stung, but she had buried those feelings beneath her dedication to nature and solitude. With a final burst of determination, she dragged the man up the short flight of wooden steps onto the porch. She fumbled with the lock, then pushed the door open, welcoming them both into the relative warmth. Inside, she switched on the bare overhead light, revealing a space filled with dried herbs and trekking gear. A small fireplace stood in one corner, and a cot, usually reserved for occasional camping guests, would serve perfectly as his bed tonight. By the time she managed to hoist him onto the cot, her muscles burned with fatigue. She scrambled to strip off his soaked outer layers, mindful of the deep cut on his forehead and the angle of his leg. The swirling gusts outside sounded fiercer than ever, and a quick glance through the window confirmed that the snow was piling up alarmingly fast. With trembling hands, she pressed a clean cloth to his wound, mentally cycling through her knowledge of herbal remedies. Her phone beeped weakly. One final message from Sarah, popping up before the signal died. Big developer sniffing around the area. Be careful out there. Maya. She stared at the phone, that cryptic warning echoing in her mind. She wondered if this stranger had any link to the looming threat she felt pressing on her community. But his shallow breaths and the storm outside reminded her that survival, not speculation, took precedence tonight. Gripping his hand lightly, she spoke as calmly as she could. "You're safe now, I promise." The morning light was dull and grey when Maya awoke, stiff-necked from falling asleep in her rocking chair. Her first thoughts were of the man she had rescued. Fighting off the lingering grogginess, she hurried over to check on him. He was stirring, eyes fluttering open with a mixture of confusion and pain. Relief washed over her like a wave. "You're awake," she murmured, carefully removing the cold compress she had placed on his forehead during the night. The dried blood had caked around the gash, and she noted its depth with some concern. "How are you feeling?" He blinked a few times, trying to gather his bearings. "Like I got hit by a truck," he answered hoarsely, voice scratchy from the cold. His eyes, a surprisingly vivid shade of blue, finally focused on her face. "Where am I?" "This is my cabin, near Boulder, Colorado," Maya replied, reaching for a small bowl of water and cloth. She began to dab at the dried blood gently. "I found you out on the trail yesterday, unconscious." He winced as she tended to his wound, but nodded in gratitude. "Thank you. I'm Ethan Holloway." For a moment he closed his eyes, bracing himself. "I think I slipped, or maybe... I'm not entirely sure what happened. My leg..." His voice trailed off into a strained groan. Maya moved to inspect his leg, carefully rolling up the makeshift bandage she had applied. The bruising spread across the calf, and she suspected a fracture. "I'm not a doctor, but this needs more than a bandage and salve," she said. "We'll have to get you to a hospital once the storm passes." At the mention of the storm, Ethan turned his head to peer out the nearest window. The landscape was an unbroken sea of white, and flakes still whirled ferociously, rendering visibility almost non-existent. The howling wind rattled the windows and made the walls creak. "I guess we're stuck," he whispered, more to himself than to her. Maya pursed her lips. "The forecast said the snowfall would be light, but this is turning out to be a real blizzard. My phone barely worked yesterday when I got a message from my friend Sarah. Now there's no service at all." She stood up to fetch another blanket. "Until this calms down, we have to make the best of it." As she settled the blanket around him, she could feel his gaze lingering on her. She was used to visitors, clients she guided on the trails, staring at her wild brown hair or her perpetually calloused hands. But this man's scrutiny felt different, more personal. It made her heart flutter uncomfortably, reminding her of the walls she'd built around herself ever since David left. "So, you live here alone?" Ethan asked, glancing around the single-room cabin. It was sparse, a small kitchenette with rustic wooden cabinets, a fireplace stacked with logs, a corner dedicated to drying herbs that hung in bunches from the ceiling. He noticed a well-worn map of the surrounding mountains pinned to the wall, red markings tracing countless routes. Maya nodded, stepping behind him to adjust the pillows. "Been here for almost 2 years. I guide mountain treks, but mostly I keep to myself. It's peaceful." A silence fell between them, punctuated only by the wind's roar. Maya felt a flash of discomfort. She wasn't used to guests who lingered longer than a night, and she certainly wasn't accustomed to looking after a stranger with a serious injury. Still, something in Ethan's demeanor, even in his pained state, put her at a curious ease. She noticed how he tried to maintain a certain dignity despite the bandaged leg and the cut on his forehead. "Thank you," he said softly, breaking the silence. "I owe you my life." She shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It's what anyone around here would do. The mountains don't care who you are. You learn to look out for each other." He tried to shift himself into a better sitting position and winced. "Do you have any painkillers or anything?" "My leg is killing me," Maya frowned. "I've got some ibuprofen, but I'm also going to brew you a tea with comfrey and willow bark. Helps with inflammation and pain. It's not a cure, but it might ease things until we can get real medical attention." Rummaging through her shelves, she gathered her herbs, measuring them with practiced hands. She had a near-encyclopedic knowledge of plants, a skill that earned her respect among locals, but also wary jokes from tourists who preferred pharmaceutical solutions. As the kettle came to a boil, she noticed Ethan absently tracing a finger over the rough patch on the cot. Despite his apparent discomfort, there was a quiet composure about him. She poured hot water over the herbs and handed him the steaming mug. "It's bitter," she warned, "but it works." He nodded in thanks, taking a careful sip. "I appreciate it," he said, forcing a small smile. "You mentioned your friend Sarah. Does she know where—" A sudden gust caused the lights to flicker, then fail altogether. The room plunged into a murky half-light, illuminated only by the grey snow glare through the windows. Maya let out a resigned sigh. "There goes the electricity. I'll get the lanterns." She paused, glancing at Ethan, uncertain. "We'll be all right, but it looks like we're going to be stuck here for a while." They exchanged a look, two strangers bound by circumstance, the distant hum of the storm intensifying as if to seal their fate. In that moment, Maya felt a peculiar mixture of dread and relief. Dread because she despised letting people into her world. Relief because, for once, she wouldn't be utterly alone. By the second day of the blizzard, the cabin felt more claustrophobic than comforting. Maya woke to the incessant wind, rattling the windows, sifting snow through the tiniest cracks along the doorframe. She found Ethan already awake, propped up on pillows, nursing the tea she had made for him. He wore a look of stiff concentration, no doubt from the pain in his leg. "Morning," she greeted curtly, heading to check the stove. The electricity still showed no signs of returning, but at least her old propane stove allowed her to boil water. "How's the head?" "Achy," Ethan admitted, touching the bandage gently. "But I've had worse hangovers." She noticed the half-smile he attempted, as though trying to lighten the atmosphere. Yet she couldn't ignore her own barriers. She'd grown too accustomed to solitude, and the presence of another person in her private domain made her guarded. Any warmth she felt toward him was overshadowed by memories of people who had used her or left her. David's face flickered in her mind, unbidden and painful. Her voice came out clipped. "Try to rest as much as possible. Don't push that leg. It needs to stay immobilized." Ethan nodded, his expression turning serious. "I appreciate everything you've done. I'd be lying if I said I'm not worried about how long we'll be stuck here." Maya glanced out the window, where the view was merely a shifting blur of white. "I've seen storms like this last for a few days, sometimes more," she said. "There's no telling when we can make it to the hospital, but as long as we have enough firewood and supplies, we should manage." Silence settled between them. In the hush, snippets of Maya's past struggles crept up like ghosts in the periphery. She remembered David's betrayal, how he'd snapped glorious photos of the Rockies with her guidance, promising they'd publish them together to fund her dream of an environmental education center. Then he vanished, taking the best shots to Los Angeles. She learned through a friend that he'd sold them to a major magazine and left her in the dust. Ethan cleared his throat, perhaps sensing the tension. "I was on a personal retreat," he explained quietly, as if hoping to draw her into conversation. I work in real estate, but I needed a break. Got too caught up in everything." This was my attempt to step away. Her ears pricked at the word real estate, stirring an instinctive mistrust. She poured water into a mug without meeting his gaze, keeping her own eyes fixed on the swirling storm outside. "Boulder's been dealing with a wave of developers wanting to build high-end resorts," she said tersely. "They eat up the land, then leave the locals and wildlife to fend for themselves." Ethan said nothing at first. She turned to see his face. There was a flicker of understanding there. Or was it guilt? She wasn't sure. "I don't handle projects like that," he said slowly. "Or at least, I try to balance development with respect for the land." Unconvinced, she stiffened. "Well, I guess we'll see." With a shrug, she gestured at his bandaged leg. "I'll check on that in a bit. It's time for your tea again, plus some ibuprofen. I'll also need to keep it elevated to reduce swelling." That set the tone for the morning. Maya busied herself with practical tasks, refilling the woodpile near the fireplace, boiling water to store in thermoses, and checking her minimal supply of food. She'd glance at him occasionally, half expecting him to pry for conversation or reveal more about himself. But he seemed to sense her emotional boundaries, refraining from idle chatter. Still, there were moments she caught him watching her, eyes filled with curiosity rather than judgment. Mid-afternoon brought fresh howling outside, and a series of thuds on the roof startled them. "Snow sliding off the pitched roof," Maya muttered when Ethan cast her a worried look. "It'll hold, it always does." She found herself recalling lessons from Tom Wilson, a seasoned forest ranger who taught her how to navigate storms and read nature's subtle signs. Tom had become something of a father figure after her own parents all but disowned her for choosing a lowly mountain lifestyle over a more lucrative career. She pictured his wiry build, his gruff laugh whenever he told her to trust the mountains but keep your eyes open. As evening fell, the wind still showed no sign of relenting. After confirming Ethan's bandages weren't soaking through, Maya finally sank into her rocking chair by the fire. She studied his profile, illuminated by the orange glow of the flames. He looked lost in thought, hands clasped, brow furrowed, as though wrestling with secrets he dared not share. "Thank you. Again," he said softly, catching her off guard. "I know it's not easy having a stranger in your home." She exhaled, tension easing just a fraction. "We'll get through this," she replied, her voice low. But even as she said it, she felt the walls inside her rise a little higher, reinforced by the memory of past betrayals. At least in the quiet of the storm, there was no one to judge her for the armor she still refused to let down. The next morning, Maya woke up determined to brave the storm for a short reconnaissance mission. The sense of entrapment inside the cabin was growing, and she wanted to see if there was any possible way to reach help. Bundling herself in layers, thermal pants, heavy coat, waterproof boots, she stepped out onto the porch. Blistering winds slammed into her, nearly throwing her off balance. She glanced back over her shoulder at Ethan, who watched from the doorway with concern etched across his features. "I won't go far," she promised, raising her voice over the gusts. "Just want to see if the trail's passable at all." He nodded reluctantly, bracing himself against the doorframe. "Be careful," he called, a new warmth in his tone. The snowdrifts towered around her, transforming familiar landmarks into an alien landscape. Maya was an expert at navigating these mountains, but today she felt uneasy. The sky was grey and low, the air heavy with the threat of more snowfall. She pressed forward, fighting the wind, each step feeling like wading through quicksand. Yet the crunch of snow under her boots was oddly comforting, reminding her that she was still in her element. As she rounded a bend near an outcropping of rocks, A sudden blast of icy wind slammed against her. She stumbled, losing her footing on an unseen patch of ice. Her feet went out from under her, and she landed hard on her side, rolling down a small slope. Fear roared through her mind. One wrong tumble in these conditions could lead to a serious injury. Gasping, she clawed at the snow, finally managing to stop herself. Trembling, she checked for damage. Some bruises, a few scrapes, but nothing severe. Above her, the wind howled a mocking tune, as if to remind her that even experienced mountaineers weren't invincible. Shaken, Maya decided the risk outweighed any benefit of continuing. She scrambled back up, heart hammering, then forced her way toward the cabin, chastened. When she burst through the door, Ethan's face flooded with relief and then immediate concern at her disheveled appearance. "What happened?" he demanded, trying to stand from the cot. A flash of pain contorted his features, and he quickly sank back down. "Slipped on ice," she admitted, cheeks flushed partly from exertion, partly from embarrassment. "I'm fine, but we're definitely not getting anywhere in this storm." She was startled to see real worry in his eyes, as though her well-being mattered to him on a personal level. "Thank God you're okay," he said, exhaling shakily. Maya took a moment to catch her breath, removing her coat and shaking off loose snow onto the porch. "Let's get this fire going again," she said, focusing on the practical. Soon, flames crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows on the log walls. Sometime later, they found themselves sitting side by side on the rug near the makeshift fireplace, both silently nursing cups of coffee. Outside, the wind still raged, but inside the cabin a small bubble of warmth formed. Maya felt an unexpected sense of closeness. She realized her resentment toward Ethan for being a city person had softened. He was injured, reliant on her, but also attentive and quietly considerate. Eventually, she broke the silence. "Thank you for worrying," she said, picking at a stray thread on her sweater. "It's just... I'm used to handling things on my own." He nodded, stretching his injured leg carefully. "I get it," he replied, voice low. "Sometimes being alone feels safer. I used to think the same way." He paused, hesitating. "I was raised by my grandmother. She didn't have much, but she taught me resilience. She always said that people should leave a place better than they found it." Maya glanced at him, curiosity piqued. "That's a good motto." "She was a good person," he continued, a touch of nostalgia in his eyes. "Lost her a few years back. I guess that's when I really threw myself into work." The sincerity in his voice chipped away a bit more of Maya's defenses. Remembering David's betrayal, she felt a pang in her chest. For so long, she had equated vulnerability with pain. Yet Ethan's quiet openness felt different, forging an unexpected kinship in her heart. They lapsed into a peaceful silence, broken only by the snap of burning logs. Outside, a gust rattled the window, as if frustrated it could not breach the sanctuary they were creating. For once, Maya found she didn't mind the closeness of another person in her private space. She glanced at him. "You should rest," she said, though her tone was gentle rather than brusque. He nodded, stifling a yawn. "Yeah, you're probably right, but thank you for opening up a bit. It means a lot." Maya didn't reply, but a faint smile touched her lips. As she helped him settle back onto the cot, she realized she was no longer thinking of him as an intruder, but as someone who might just understand her lonely world. And for the first time since the storm began, she felt a glimmer of hope, like the faintest hint of spring amid the brutal Colorado winter. By the third day of being snowed in together, an unexpected warmth had settled into the cabin. The storm raged on outside, but within those log walls, Maya felt a sense of closeness she hadn't experienced in years. She set a pot of hearty vegetable stew over the fire, stirring the contents with care. Even with her limited supplies, she was determined to keep them both well fed. Ethan watched her from the cot, where he sat propped on pillows. His injured leg still throbbed, but the improvised splint Maya had fashioned with sturdy sticks and bandages had helped stabilize it. He found himself marveling at her resourcefulness, whether it was her knowledge of medicinal herbs or her skill in rationing food. She seemed to thrive in this rustic setting. "You really know your way around the mountains," he commented, nodding toward the drying herbs hanging above the wooden counter. "I don't think I've ever met someone so connected to a place." Maya's cheeks reddened slightly, though she tried to brush off the compliment. "I've been doing this most of my life," she replied, ladling stew into 2 chipped ceramic bowls. "My mentor, Tom Wilson, practically raised me in these forests when my parents, well, let's just say they weren't too supportive of my choices." She handed him a bowl and settled on a stool beside the cot. For a long while, they ate in comfortable silence, listening to the wind buffet the walls. The savory aroma of the stew mingled with the scent of burning pine from the fireplace. Ethan occasionally winced from the pain in his leg, but a steady dose of ibuprofen and Maya's herbal teas seemed to be helping. Eventually, he spoke up. "Maya, I know you don't like to talk about your past, but if we're going to be stuck here, would you mind telling me a bit about it? I don't want to pry, but I'd like to know more about the person who saved my life." She hesitated, gripping the bowl tighter. Talking about her past felt like peeling off a scab that had never fully healed. Still, something about the soft glow of the fire, or maybe the genuine curiosity in Ethan's eyes, coaxed her to open up. "I moved back here after my ex, David, left. He was a photographer with big ambitions. We had this plan to start an environmental awareness project together. He'd take photos of the wildlife and landscapes, I'd provide guided treks, and we'd open a center to teach visitors how to respect the environment. But when he got an offer in Los Angeles, he packed up and never looked back." Her voice turned brittle. "He took everything we built together, my trust, the best photos, and my hopes for that education center. It sounds naive now, but at the time it was devastating." Ethan set his empty bowl on the floor, his expression somber. "I'm sorry that happened. It's not naive to believe in something you care about. Sometimes people show their true colors at the worst moments." She looked away, focusing on the flicker of the flames. "Yeah, well, lesson learned. I poured myself into guiding tours and living out here. I don't want to rely on anyone ever again." He reached over, gently placing a hand on her arm. She felt an electric tingle where his warm skin met hers. "I can't pretend to understand what you went through," he said softly, "but I get how betrayal makes it hard to trust again." A moment passed, charged with unspoken emotions. The sounds of the storm outside receded, as if granting them a private space to share their pain. Almost unconsciously, Maya leaned closer, and Ethan's fingers curled around hers. Her heart raced at the contact, a delicate thread of connection forming between them. Before the moment could deepen, Ethan tried to shift his position, forgetting his injured leg. A sharp stab of pain made him grimace, and he nearly toppled off the cot. Maya reacted instantly, catching him against her shoulder. Their faces ended up inches apart, breath mingling in the cool air. She felt the warmth of his exhale brush her cheek. "You should be more careful," she chided, though her voice was gentle. He gave a short laugh, slightly embarrassed. "I'll remember that." They adjusted themselves, carefully moving, so that his leg wouldn't be jostled further. But the mood had shifted, a tender undercurrent lingering in the space between them. Maya noticed how he glanced at her, a newfound softness in his gaze. For the first time since David's betrayal, she found herself wanting to know more about Ethan, his life, and the possibility that the world might not be as cruel as she'd come to believe. Quietly, he pulled a small sketchbook from his jacket pocket. She watched, intrigued, as he opened it to reveal rough drawings of cabins, eco-friendly resorts, and landscapes blended seamlessly with modern architecture. She let out a soft gasp of admiration. "You drew these?" He nodded. "Just ideas," he said, clearing his throat. "Some concepts I've been playing with. I'm interested in designing places that actually fit into their environment, rather than overpower it." Maya nodded, recalling her dream of an education center. Feeling a spark of something akin to hope, she offered him a small smile. "I'd like to see more of your designs sometime." Their eyes met again, and for a fleeting moment, the storm, the cold, and even the painful memories seemed to fade into the background. Caught in the warmth of the firelight and each other's presence, it felt like the first real thaw after a long, harsh winter. With the storm still raging outside and the electricity long gone, Maya lit 2 thick candles and placed them on the small wooden table in the center of the cabin. The dim light flickered, dancing across the rough-hewn walls and casting elongated shadows on the floor. She'd managed to rustle up enough ingredients for a simple meal: canned vegetables, a few strips of dried beef, and potatoes softened over the fire. Despite the limited pantry, the savory aroma filled the small room, a welcome contrast to the punishing cold outside. Ethan, propped up on pillows on the cot, watched her with quiet admiration. He still looked a bit pale, the cut on his forehead clean but red around the edges, and his leg remained splintered and elevated, yet there was a distinct warmth in his gaze whenever he turned it on her. This cabin, though small, had become their entire world. Maya set the plates down and took a seat across from him. "It's not gourmet, but it'll do," she said, offering a half smile. "I'm thankful for anything warm," Ethan replied. He attempted to shift, letting out a slight wince. "I still can't believe how quickly the storm rolled in. I'm just glad you found me." For a moment, the wind howled, rattling the shutters as if in agreement. Maya nodded. "Yeah, well, the Rockies have a mind of their own. You learn not to underestimate them." She bent forward to spoon some of the stew onto his plate. Their hands brushed, a faint spark jumping between them that neither acknowledged aloud. Before they could dig into the meal, Maya's cell phone, perched on a windowsill in a desperate attempt to catch a signal, buzzed once, surprising them both. She scrambled to grab it, seeing Sarah's name flash on the screen. Her voice was unsteady when she answered. "Sarah, can you hear me?" Sarah's familiar tone crackled through the speakers, threaded with static. "Maya, I've been worried sick. The lines are down all over town. Are you safe?" "Is the stranger okay?" Maya shared a quick glance with Ethan. "We're both fine, but the storm is still bad. No one's coming or going for a while." Sarah's voice softened. "Don't shut yourself off, Maya. Sometimes unexpected things turn out better than we think. Just don't close the door on what could be a good thing." The signal fizzled, and then the line went dead, leaving only the faint beep of a lost connection. Maya set the phone aside, cheeks flushing as she felt Ethan's curious gaze on her. She cleared her throat. "Sarah's known me forever. She thinks well, let's just say she thinks I'm too guarded." "She might not be wrong," Ethan commented gently, earning a quick side-eye from Maya. Sensing her discomfort, he changed the subject. "Let's eat before it gets cold." They fell silent, the clinking of utensils the only sound until Ethan spoke again. "I used to love dinners by candlelight. My grandmother insisted on turning the lights off once a week to save power, and she said it reminded us how people used to live more simply." He paused, voice tinged with nostalgia. "She raised me in a tiny apartment in the Bronx. We didn't have much, but she made everything feel warm." Maya's expression softened. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." He nodded. "She was." After she passed, I kind of lost that sense of simplicity. It's been work, work, work ever since. Maya glanced around at the rustic interior, the small wooden shelves crammed with dried herbs and a few well-worn books. Simplicity isn't always comfortable, especially when storms hit, she said, recalling her own struggles keeping this place maintained. But it can keep you grounded, I guess. Ethan's gaze flicked to the corner of the room where a leather-bound notebook lay. Is that your writing? Maya stiffened, shooting him a cautious look. Just notes about the trails and some poems, I guess. She tried to dismiss the subject, but Ethan's interest had been piqued. Poems. He leaned forward slightly, wincing as he moved his leg. I never would have guessed you write poetry. She shrugged, cheeks warming. It's just something I do for myself, mostly about the mountains and what they mean to me. That's incredible, Ethan said earnestly. I'd love to hear some someday. Maya's first instinct was to clamp down and change the topic, but Sarah's words echoed in her mind. Don't shut yourself off. Instead, she reached for a small scrap of paper near the candle. It's not much, she offered, voice low. Just a few lines I wrote last month. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the edges and recited, The pine's hush knows secrets untold. In solitude's shadow we find ourselves, where wind echoes loss, the soul grows bold, mountains stand firm while hope quietly swells. The final word hovered in the air, and Ethan exhaled, eyes reflecting the candlelight. That's beautiful, he murmured, genuine admiration in his tone. Maya felt her defenses slip a notch. She took a bite of stew to cover her vulnerability, but the quiet thrill in her chest wouldn't be ignored. They continued their meal, occasionally brushing hands when passing salt or refilling cups. Each touch felt like a small electric current, both unsettling and strangely comforting. When they were nearly finished, Ethan mentioned a name Maya didn't recognize. I've got this friend, Michael Taylor. He's been telling me for years I need to slow down, maybe even walk away from the business. He's the only one who really gets me. She tilted her head, intrigued. That's the second time you've hinted at some big corporate life. What? Are you a CEO or something? The question hung in the air. Ethan hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. I'm involved in real estate development in New York. It's complicated. He took a sip of water, eyes drifting away. But here, in this cabin, I just want to be. Maya almost pressed further but decided against it. Something about his tone suggested he wasn't ready to reveal the full picture, and for now, she was content with the flickering candlelight, the warmth of the stew, and the tentative new bond forming between them. Outside, the storm might rage on, but inside, there was a different kind of spark. One Sarah had warned her not to extinguish too soon. By the fourth day of confinement, an uneasy routine had settled over the cabin. Snow piled against the windows, and whenever Maya pried open the front door, a freezing gust nearly blew her off her feet. The propane stove and the fireplace proved to be lifesavers, keeping them warm enough to stave off the bitter cold. Dinners by candlelight had become the norm, and so had lengthy conversations that hovered just shy of confession. That evening, as the wind whistled eerily around the cabin, Ethan proposed an idea. Let's play a card game, he said, rummaging through the single drawer in the small wooden table. There, he found a battered deck, edges yellowed by time. I used to play this game with my grandmother when I was a kid. Each card you flip, you have to share a truth, something real about yourself. Maya eyed the deck warily. I don't do so well with personal questions. Ethan merely offered a mild smile. We can go as deep or as shallow as we like, but maybe it'll help pass the time. She relented, sliding a stool next to the cot. The flickering firelight lent a certain intimacy to the moment, an atmosphere that made secrets feel safer to reveal than they might otherwise. She fanned out the cards and picked one at random, a 6 of hearts. Ethan nodded. Okay, tell me. 6 is for childhood memories, something you remember that still makes you smile. Maya bit her lip, thinking, I used to follow Tom Wilson around when I was 7 or 8. He'd show me how to identify animal tracks in the snow. I remember the first time I recognized a wolf print on my own. I was so excited. I tripped and fell face first into a snowdrift. A small chuckle escaped her. Tom teased me for weeks, but he also said that enthusiasm is what made me special. It was nice, feeling like an explorer in my own backyard. She placed the card on the table, and Ethan drew his own, an ace of spades. Ace is a big one, Maya said, recalling a faint memory of the rules. It's an any truth goes question, right? He tilted his head. Yes, it can be anything. After a brief pause, he decided, I'll share why I ended up in Colorado. He inhaled deeply. I felt suffocated in my life. Too many responsibilities, too many people wanting something from me. My father's a powerful man, and the pressure to live up to his expectations has been constant. I needed to step away, so I thought the mountains might give me clarity. Maya listened, her curiosity piqued. Did you find it? He gave a half laugh. I found frostbite and a busted leg before clarity, but maybe it's coming. Slowly. Their game continued, card after card, flipping under the soft glow of the lantern and the crackle of the fire. With each new symbol or number, a piece of their histories came to light. Ethan spoke of feeling lonely in a sea of corporate dealings. Maya confessed to writing poetry to cope with heartbreak. Ethan admitted he always dreamed of building sustainable homes, but got sidetracked by the lure of big money. Eventually, an ominous rumble echoed outside, and the cabin walls trembled. Maya's eyes went wide. That sounded like an avalanche, she said, jumping to her feet. Despite the storm, the rumble was too close for comfort. She hurried to the window, but saw only darkness, the swirling snow revealing nothing of the mountainside. Her mind spun with the possibilities. If an avalanche had occurred on one of the higher ridges, it could block the main roads or even endanger remote cabins. She felt a surge of helplessness, trapped in her own little bubble of snow and limited resources. Ethan watched the worry ripple across her face. Is there anything we can do? She shook her head. Not now. We can't even get to the next ridge with my snowmobile buried under drifts, and your leg's still messed up. We'll have to wait and hope it didn't take out anything crucial. Sometimes avalanches happen deeper in the backcountry and don't affect the lower trails. They both sat in uneasy silence, the card game momentarily forgotten. The flicker of closeness they'd been fostering was overshadowed by the stark reality of their situation. Eventually, Maya slumped back onto her stool, exhaling heavily. Everything out here reminds you how small you are, she muttered, half to herself. Ethan reached over, placing his hand gently on hers. Small, maybe, but resilient, he said, echoing a lesson he seemed to have learned from his grandmother. Don't forget that. The contact between them remained, a mutual acknowledgement of both vulnerability and determination. Before Maya could pull away, Ethan asked, You ever talk to your family about your life here? She broke the gaze, focusing on the worn deck of cards. My parents and we're not close. They never understood why I chose this path. The only family member I'm sort of in touch with is my younger sister, Emma. She's studying marine biology in California. Completely different environment, but she's following her passion, at least. A shadow crossed her face. We talk sometimes, but it's strained. I think she feels like she can't measure up. Or maybe I come across as judgmental. I don't know. Sounds complicated, Ethan said gently. Maya nodded. It is. We used to be inseparable when we were kids. She grabbed the deck and began shuffling, trying to refocus. Maybe if the storm ever ends, I can convince her to visit. She might see I'm not as cold as I seem. Ethan studied her, sympathy and a hint of admiration in his eyes. I don't think you're cold, he whispered, the candlelight reflecting in his gaze. Their card game resumed, though the mood was more somber, tinged by the rumble of the possible avalanche and the uncertain future they both faced. Yet each confided secret, each shared fear, forged a delicate bond between them, a reminder that even in the darkest winter, a spark of connection could be enough to keep hope alive. By the fifth morning, the storm's fury had begun to wane. Icy gusts still rattled the windows, but now there were occasional pockets of calm, like the mountain was pausing for breath. Maya ventured onto the covered porch to gather a few dried logs, relieved to see that the snowfall was finally tapering off. The horizon remained cloaked in white, but the wind had lost some of its vicious edge. Inside, she found Ethan leaning against the wall, carefully testing how much weight he could put on his injured leg. He winced, but managed to step with the help of a wooden crutch she'd fashioned from sturdy branches. She rushed over, concern plain on her face. "You shouldn't push it," she warned, steadying him with a hand on his arm. "I won't go far," Ethan reassured her. "I just need to move around before I lose all feeling in my muscles." A faint smile tugged at Maya's lips. "Okay, but no heroics, all right?" Guiding him gently, she led him to the side door that opened onto her small enclosed porch, really just a few planks with a makeshift roof, where she kept potted herbs protected from harsher weather. Brushing a thin layer of snow off the wooden railing, she showed him her modest garden, pots of sage, thyme, and comfrey, each with its own handwritten label. The cold snap was threatening their survival, but some had managed to hang on under the sheltered canopy. "These are what you've been using to treat my injuries?" Ethan asked, brow furrowed in mild astonishment. "Mostly the comfrey and willow bark," Maya explained. "They're not miracle workers, but they help with inflammation and pain. I've spent years learning which plants can heal and which can harm. The mountains can provide almost everything, if you know where to look." He ran a careful finger along the edge of a comfrey leaf, nodding in appreciation. "You sound like someone who respects the land deeply. I wish more people understood that." She regarded him, measuring his sincerity. "Most city folks come here looking for a vacation story or an adrenaline rush. They don't stop to realize how delicate the ecosystem is." She paused, glancing at him. "Sorry. I guess I'm used to being cynical about outsiders." Ethan leaned on his crutch, a faint smile crossing his face. "You wouldn't be wrong to be cautious. In my line of work, I've seen plenty of developers who treat natural beauty like a commodity, something to be sold off for profit, with no regard for sustainability." Her brow arched. "You say that like you don't agree with them." He hesitated, clearly choosing his words. "I don't," he said at last, voice quiet but firm. "There's a better way, but it's not exactly the most profitable route. Let's just say I've had my share of arguments with colleagues about it." A thoughtful silence settled. It struck Maya how little she actually knew about Ethan's world. He'd hinted at a high-pressure career back east, something involving real estate. But seeing him here, gently touching her herb plants, it was hard to reconcile him with the image of a ruthless businessman. Before she could pry further, he gestured to the sky visible through the porch roof. "Is that clearing I see up there? Maybe we'll be able to get help soon." She nodded, though her stomach twisted at the thought. "I'm sure we'll be out of here soon enough. The roads will be cleared, my phone might start working properly, and life goes back to normal." As soon as she said it, she realized a part of her dreaded that moment. She had grown accustomed to the closeness, the quiet vulnerability they shared in this rustic isolation. They retreated inside when the chill became too much. Maya stoked the fire, and Ethan opened his sketchbook to show her more designs. An eco-lodge with slanted roofs that collected rainwater, a cabin complex built around existing trees to minimize deforestation. His passion was evident in every pencil stroke. "These are beautiful," Maya admitted, studying the intricate lines. "You're not just about maximizing space or profit, you're actually designing with the land in mind." He looked almost shy, fiddling with the corner of the page. "That's the dream. I want to prove to people that you can create something luxurious without destroying what makes a place unique." She wanted to ask more, to see where this determination sprang from, but hesitated. Instead, she pulled out a map of the local forest. "If you ever want to see some of the hidden spots around here, waterfalls, old-growth pines, I could show you." Their eyes met, a warm tension simmering in the space between them. His gaze was filled with gratitude and something deeper. "I'd like that," he replied softly. They spent the rest of the afternoon tidying the cabin, reorganizing supplies. At one point, their hands brushed as they both reached for a stray bowl on the table. A spark flashed between them, and Maya felt a surge of something she couldn't quite name. Fear, excitement, longing. She glanced away, heart pounding. The snow beyond the windows wasn't the only thing melting. She could sense her own defenses softening, her guarded solitude giving way to an awakened awareness of the man who had all but crashed into her life. And from the way Ethan's eyes lingered on her, it seemed he felt it too. But along with the stirrings of attraction came a pang of worry. What would happen once the storm passed? The mountains had a way of revealing truths, and these past days had laid bare the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, two people from vastly different worlds could find common ground. She breathed in the scent of burning logs and drying herbs, sending a silent plea that time might slow down, if only for a little while longer. The fifth evening arrived with a calm so sudden it felt eerie. The roar of the wind diminished to a faint hiss, and for the first time in days, patches of the sky gleamed through the clearing storm clouds. Maya, feeling cooped up, suggested they step onto the porch to take in the unfamiliar stillness. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, balancing on his makeshift crutch. "It's like the world decided to take a breath," he remarked, wincing slightly as he maneuvered outside. Maya gazed upwards. "Look," she said, pointing to a dark expanse overhead. "See those stars? That's Orion's belt, common among alpinists for orientation. And over there," she shifted a step closer, brushing against his arm as she guided his line of sight, "that's Cassiopeia. It's how we find the North Star." Ethan tilted his head, squinting. "I never realized just how bright they could be without city lights drowning them out." They stood in companionable silence, breath turning to vapor in the crisp air. Above them, a half-moon peeked through ragged clouds. For a moment, Maya felt something akin to contentment, her heartbeat slowing, her chest loosening from the tension of the past few days. The swirl of stars reminded her why she had chosen this life. This was her domain, far from the neon hum and ceaseless rush of the urban world. Eventually, they retreated inside, warmed by the knowledge that the storm was weakening. Instead of the usual stew or reheated leftovers, Ethan insisted on cooking a more elaborate meal using the limited supplies they had. Maya watched in fascination as he deftly chopped carrots and onions, seasoning them with a skill that spoke of more than just casual culinary interest. "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" she asked, stirring a pot of boiling water beside him. He grinned, throwing in a pinch of salt. "Believe it or not, I took a few cooking classes in college. It was a stress reliever. I never got to do it much, though once. Life happened." Maya handed him a small jar of dried herbs. Life does have a knack for getting in the way, but you seem to have a real talent for it. They worked side by side, bodies occasionally bumping in the confined space. The air in the cabin soon filled with the comforting aroma of simmering spices. By the time they sat down to eat, the meal looked almost gourmet. A hearty stew thick with vegetables, toasted bread, and a side of beans cooked with fragrant herbs. As they ate, the lantern light flickered, casting moving shapes on the walls like dancing shadows. It lent the evening an intimacy that made Maya more aware than ever of Ethan's presence. His quick smiles, the gentle tone of his voice whenever he asked how she was holding up. At one point, the faint static of the emergency radio crackled, grabbing their attention. Maya quickly turned the dial, trying to tune in. Amidst the hiss, a distorted voice emerged, announcing that state crews were working tirelessly to clear major roads. Some routes around Boulder would be opened soon. Maya exchanged a glance with Ethan, her heart sinking even as relief washed over her. She wanted the roads cleared, people likely needed help, and Ethan definitely required proper medical attention. Yet the thought of him leaving tugged at an unexpected ache inside her. "Guess we won't be trapped here much longer," she said softly, setting the radio aside. Ethan's eyes flicked to the window where the sky had cleared even more. "Probably not," he agreed, though his tone was subdued. "I feel a little strange about it. Part of me wants a shower and a real bed, but part of me—" He trailed off, swallowing whatever confession had been on his tongue. Maya picked at the remainder of her meal, suddenly lacking appetite. She remembered how she used to be an active participant in local environmental rallies, writing petitions, standing with neighbors to protect certain forested areas from logging or tourist development. She'd retreated from that after David's departure, choosing solitude over collective activism. A pang of regret nudged her now, reminding her that she was not powerless against change. She just needed to find her voice again. They cleared the table in silence. Afterward, Ethan lowered himself onto the worn couch near the fire, while Maya perched on a stool, hugging her knees to her chest. Outside, the quiet felt almost otherworldly compared to the previous day's relentless howling. "You mentioned once you used to fight for this land," Ethan said softly, breaking the stillness. "Why'd you stop?" She sighed, the memory burning. "David's betrayal took the wind out of me. I guess I figured it was easier not to dream too big. But now I'm starting to wonder if I made the right choice." He nodded, brow furrowed. "Sometimes we step away from what we love because it hurts too much when things go wrong." His gaze drifted to the flickering fire. "Still, maybe you haven't lost that passion. You've just been keeping it safe." Maya processed his words, a swirl of warmth and unease swirling in her chest. The idea that she could reignite her involvement in something bigger than herself was both exhilarating and terrifying. Before she could respond, a log in the fireplace popped, sending a spray of sparks upward. They watched the embers dance, the cabin momentarily illuminated by flashes of orange light. The hush between them crackled with unspoken sentiments. Maya felt her pulse hammer in her ears, wanting to reach out, to do something, anything, to seal this fragile connection. But the moment passed, leaving them in a reflective quiet. And as the radio static reminded them of the world just beyond their wooden walls, they both knew that reality would soon come knocking. For now, though, they had this evening of starry skies, candlelit shadows, and unspoken dreams, an interlude in which anything seemed possible. On the 6th day, the roads were still officially closed, but the forecast promised that snowplows would reach more remote sections soon. With the end of their enforced isolation looming, the air in the cabin felt charged with a blend of anticipation and reluctance. Maya found herself checking the windows frequently, half hoping the plows would be delayed. By late afternoon, a new round of clouds rolled in, bringing another dusting of snow that shimmered gently in the waning light. Ethan's leg was healing, but he remained cautious. While he no longer appeared feverish, the cut on his forehead was healing into a pale line that looked stark against his otherwise tanned skin. They ended up in their usual spots by the fireplace, Maya in her rocking chair, Ethan on the couch with his splintered leg propped up. Fatigue pressed on them both, but conversation soon drifted to deeper waters. In the hush of the flickering flames, Ethan closed his eyes and spoke. "I grew up without a father's presence, really. He was always traveling, closing deals, building the business. So my grandmother raised me. I think that's why I value her lessons so much. She taught me respect for people, for nature, for myself." Maya listened intently, remembering the fleeting mentions he'd made of a broken engagement. "You mentioned someone, Jessica." He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "We were engaged years ago. She left me when she realized how consumed I was by work, and probably by the influence of my father. Jessica wanted a man who was already established, comfortable, and frankly, she didn't have the patience for me figuring myself out. I don't blame her entirely. I was distant, wrapped up in ambition." Maya studied the lines of weariness beneath his eyes, feeling a tug of sympathy. "Do you ever regret it ending?" Ethan gave a rueful smile. "At first, yes, but eventually I understood we were never right for each other. She liked the idea of a polished businessman, and I'm not sure that's who I really am." A piece of wood collapsed in the fire, sending sparks fluttering upward. In that brief surge of light, Maya caught a glimpse of turmoil in his gaze. It matched her own inner conflict. Fear of letting someone in, fear of losing herself again. She folded her arms, inhaling deeply. "I get it," she said. "I love someone who left too. David, he took my dream and made it his ticket out of here. I haven't been able to trust anyone since." Their eyes met, and for a moment words felt inadequate. Slowly, Ethan reached out, his fingers closing over her hand. She allowed it, letting the warmth of his skin seep into hers. "Maybe," he began, voice low, "maybe we've both been punishing ourselves, hiding away from the world because it hurt too much to face it." Maya swallowed hard. The notion rang uncomfortably true. She averted her gaze, watching the flames dance. "I don't want to make that mistake again," she admitted. "I've become so guarded." He squeezed her hand gently. "I understand. I'm guarded too. But I don't want to leave here without being honest about how I feel. These days in the cabin, they've been more meaningful to me than any business deal or fancy party I've ever attended." Her pulse kicked up, the confession both thrilling and terrifying. She could sense the edge of something monumental, a choice that might pull her out of the safe cocoon she'd woven. She leaned forward, heart pounding. Their faces were inches apart, the heat of the fire and the closeness of his breath making her lightheaded. Their lips brushed, tentative at first, then deeper, igniting a flash of urgency. Maya's eyes fluttered shut as she allowed herself to be caught in the moment, a moment she'd resisted for days. Just as the kiss intensified, a sudden roar startled them. A large chunk of snow slid from the roof, thudding onto the porch with a crash. They broke apart, both breathing heavily. A frisson of laughter escaped Maya's lips, shaky and a bit self-conscious. "I guess the mountain has impeccable timing." Ethan's cheeks were flushed, but he managed a grin. "I've never been interrupted by a roof avalanche before." They sat back, space opening up between them. A tangle of emotions swirled in the air: desire, relief, and a creeping uncertainty about what the outside world would bring. Regaining her composure, Maya stoked the fire, hiding her trembling hands. Ethan cleared his throat. "So, about your dream, the environmental center, do you still think about it?" She paused, staring into the glowing embers. "All the time," she admitted softly. "I can't afford to start it on my own, and I'm terrified of partnering with the wrong people, but it's still alive in here." She tapped her chest. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "People with vision often face the biggest obstacles. I, for one, would love to see a place like that, especially if it teaches visitors to treasure what they're experiencing." She looked at him, a question forming on her lips. But before she could ask if he might ever be interested in such a venture, she caught herself. They were still practically strangers, and she barely trusted him enough to share her poems, let alone collaborate on a dream that had once been shattered by betrayal. Silence enveloped them again, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the groan of settling snow outside. Yet in that hush, there was an unspoken promise. The storm might be ending, but something new had begun, forged by confessions, quiet resolve, and the lingering taste of an almost stolen kiss. On the seventh morning, pale sunlight filtered through the cabin's frosted windows, painting the rough wooden floor in soft gold. Maya blinked awake, heart pounding with a mixture of relief and sorrow. She had grown used to waking up each day to the hush of snowfall and Ethan's presence, his slow, careful movements as he tested his injured leg, his appreciative nod whenever she handed him a mug of steaming herbal tea. She rose to find him already dressed, albeit carefully, to accommodate his splint, attempting to gather his scattered belongings. "Your leg doing any better?" she asked quietly, brushing loose strands of hair from her eyes. He nodded. "Still painful, but I can manage a short walk if I'm careful. I think it'll be okay once I get proper medical attention." Maya glanced outside, where the sunlight was far brighter than any morning before. "The worst of the storm has passed, I think. We might be able to hike to the nearest trailhead, or at least see if the main road is cleared." Even as she said it, a knot twisted in her stomach. This was the day they'd both known would come, the day he would leave. She busied herself making breakfast from the final scraps in her pantry, oatmeal sweetened with a little sugar and a pinch of salt. Their conversation was sparse, overshadowed by the weight of impending departure. Ethan, leaning on his crutch, ate in silence. Maya couldn't bring herself to ask him about what he'd do once he got back to his life in New York. Around mid-morning, they heard the unmistakable thrum of helicopter blades in the distance, followed by a loudspeaker crackling announcements. Maya rushed out onto the porch. Through a gap in the tree line, she spotted a red and white rescue chopper hovering, likely surveying the area for stranded hikers or remote cabins. Her heart leapt and sank at the same time. "It's a rescue team," Ethan said from behind her, shielding his eyes from the sun's glare. She nodded, swallowing hard. A wave of reality washed over her. This was good news. He needed medical help. Other people needed rescue. The region needed to return to normalcy. And yet, it felt like a door closing on something intimate and raw they had shared. As they hurriedly gathered the last of his supplies, a rumble of an engine broke the quiet. A snowcat, followed by a modified truck, appeared at the edge of the forest trail. Tom Wilson, the gray-bearded park ranger who had mentored Maya, jumped out, calling her name. Relief spread through her. Tom was a comforting fixture in her life, a paternal presence when her own father had kept his distance. Tom's concern was evident as he climbed the porch steps. "You two all right? We've been worried. Roads just got cleared enough for us to come up here." Maya nodded, feeling a swirl of gratitude and sadness. "We're fine, Tom." "This is Ethan. He's got a fractured leg and a cut on his head." Ethan shook Tom's hand, introducing himself with a restrained politeness. As Tom helped him down the steps, Maya noticed the flash of recognition in Tom's eyes. The ranger had likely heard about Ethan Holloway, the man behind big real estate deals, though he said nothing in the moment. What truly shattered the fragile sense of calm was the abrupt appearance of a phone call once they reached Tom's vehicle. In the swirl of new signals, Ethan's phone lit up with multiple missed calls and messages. A jingle-like ringtone began to play, startling them both. Ethan hesitated before answering. On the line was Victor Reynolds, an assistant who worked closely with him. Maya overheard fragments of the conversation, talk of urgent board meetings, decisions that needed immediate input, and references to Holloway developments. Her stomach clenched as the puzzle pieces clicked into place. She knew that name. Holloway Developments was rumored to have interests in transforming parts of Boulder's mountains into luxury retreats. Ethan ended the call, catching her stricken expression. Before he could explain, Tom gently steered them toward the truck. "We need to get you both down the mountain and to the hospital. Ethan, your leg needs proper care." He glanced at Maya, his voice dipping. "We can talk more once everyone's safe." She climbed into the truck, carefully tucking herself near the back. Ethan settled next to her, wincing as he maneuvered his leg. The sense of closeness that had enveloped them in the cabin dissipated under the scrutiny of rescuers and the roar of engines. When Tom turned the key, the radio in the vehicle blasted the local news channel. A reporter was discussing the impact of the storm and then shifted to a segment about potential real estate expansion in Boulder. Maya caught the phrase "major developer from New York," rumored to be a Holloway, and her gaze darted to Ethan. His eyes were fixed on the window, jaw set. He didn't deny the connection, nor did he attempt to meet her stare. In that moment, Maya felt a cold pang in her chest, like a sudden chill that wormed its way into her bones. The man she had sheltered, grown close to, confessed parts of his soul to, was more than a simple city stranger. He was a key figure in a battle that threatened the land she loved, the community she defended. She turned away, gripping the seat as the truck rumbled to life and began its descent. The mountains rolled past, still blanketed in snow. Only a few days ago, she and Ethan had huddled by the fire, sharing whispered stories and half-formed dreams. Now, she could scarcely reconcile that gentle, thoughtful man with the corporate billionaire whose name sparked dread in environmental circles. And so, as the truck drove on, Maya closed her eyes against the sting of betrayal. She replayed every confession in her mind, questioning what had been genuine and what had been left unsaid. The storm, it seemed, had ended, but another kind of tempest now churned within her, threatening to undo all the fragile hope she'd dared to embrace. Back in town, the world felt jarringly loud after the hush of the storm. Snowplows rumbled down the streets, pushing aside drifts that had turned Boulder into a maze of white embankments. People hurried about in heavy coats and boots, digging out cars or stocking up on supplies. Everywhere there was talk of collapsed roofs, avalanches, and close calls. Maya walked alongside the stretcher, carrying Ethan into the small community hospital, her thoughts in turmoil. Tom Wilson, the veteran park ranger, had insisted on driving them straight to the emergency entrance. Inside, nurses scurried to greet them, ushering Ethan away for x-rays. Maya hovered at the periphery, arms folded tightly across her chest, unsure of her place now that they were no longer bound by the storm's isolation. Her eyes flicked to the tension in Ethan's jaw as hospital staff carefully transferred him onto a gurney. A doctor stepped forward, adjusting the bright overhead light to examine the sutures on Ethan's forehead. The sound of monitors and the hum of fluorescent lamps made Maya's head spin. It was all so different from the cozy cabin and the steady crackle of a wood fire. Within minutes, a lean, bespectacled man in a tailored overcoat entered, greeting Ethan with brisk concern. "Mr. Holloway, I came as soon as I heard," the man said, looking relieved yet frazzled. Maya recognized the voice from that phone call in the rescue truck, Victor Reynolds, Ethan's assistant. In that moment, the distance between her and Ethan felt crushing. She watched the quick, clipped conversation between them, mentions of urgent board meetings, stockholders, and the press that wanted statements about the CEO's accident. As soon as the words CEO and billionaire were uttered, the nurses and orderlies gave each other knowing glances. Maya felt a cold wave sink through her, the realization of just how wide the chasm was between her world and his. Tom, standing at Maya's elbow, cleared his throat. "You want me to drop you back at your place?" he asked quietly, a fatherly concern in his gaze. She hesitated, gaze drifting back to Ethan. He was lying against the pillows, IV drip inserted, brow knitted in pain. A flicker of something, regret, crossed his features when their eyes met. It struck her that despite his wealth and status, he was still injured, vulnerable. But as much as her heart lurched with empathy, she couldn't ignore the feeling of betrayal. "Yes, please," she finally answered, stepping back. She turned toward Ethan with a professional calm that felt almost foreign on her own face. "Rest up," she said, voice subdued. "You'll be okay now." His eyes searched hers, something akin to desperation flickering there. "Maya, wait." But Victor Reynolds had already placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder, murmuring questions about media statements and the logistics of Ethan's flight back to New York. Maya used the distraction to slip away, grateful that the tears threatening to well up remained unshed. Her chest felt too tight, her breath too shallow. She made herself walk, one foot in front of the other, until she exited the hospital's sliding doors and stepped out into the cold sunshine. In the parking lot, Tom gave her a worried glance as they climbed into his old pickup truck. "So," he began, trying to sound casual, "the fellow's a Holloway, is he?" His tone was carefully neutral, but she caught a note of wary curiosity beneath it. Maya nodded, staring at her boots. "Yes, Holloway Developments, the same ones that have been eyeing up land here for a while. The expansions that threaten Daniel Cruz's farm and other areas in the mountains." She exhaled sharply. "I had no idea." Tom scratched at his beard, starting the engine. "Sometimes life throws curveballs, kiddo. Doesn't mean he's like all the others." She recalled her long conversations with Ethan by the fire, his sketches of sustainable buildings, his confessions about the emptiness he felt in corporate life. Could all that have been genuine if he was part of the same machine that devoured nature for profit? Confusion warred with the memory of his gentle touch, the care in his eyes whenever she spoke of her dreams. I need to think," she murmured, looking out at the towering snow piles. Tom nodded, respecting her space, and drove in silence. Houses and shops passed by, some with collapsed awnings, others adorned with cheerful holiday lights shining beneath the snow. In the distance, the imposing silhouette of the Rockies rose, still draped in winter's mantle. They had been both her sanctuary and the stage where her life had changed overnight. When they reached Maya's cabin, Tom lingered a moment, as if wanting to offer advice but not sure how. "We'll talk soon," he said finally. "And, be gentle with yourself, all right?" She nodded, stepping onto her porch. "Thank you, Tom." As his truck rumbled away, Maya stood alone, the fresh snow crunching under her boots. She gazed at her humble cabin, a place of solitude that had, in the midst of a raging blizzard, become a crucible for unexpected closeness. Now, it felt emptier than ever. She pushed open the door and slipped inside. The fire was out, the hearth cold. She ran a hand across the rough timber walls, recalling every moment of warmth she'd shared with Ethan here. Then, unable to hold back any longer, she sank into a chair and let the tears fall silently. The storm had passed, but the tempest within her raged on, fueled by doubt and a painful sense that something precious had slipped through her fingers. The sound of steel crutches clacking against linoleum floors accompanied Ethan Holloway's every move in the hospital's physical therapy unit. Though his leg wasn't badly broken, more of a hairline fracture, he had weeks of rehabilitation ahead to regain full strength. The cut on his forehead had been stitched neatly, leaving a thin scab he touched absently whenever his thoughts turned to Maya. Days passed, and the bustle of the hospital became his new normal. Nurses came and went, doctors checked his vitals, and each morning a young PT assistant guided him through gentle exercises. Victor Reynolds stopped by daily with updates on Holloway developments. The business had continued in Ethan's absence, but not without tensions flaring in the boardroom. "Your father wants to call an emergency meeting," Victor explained one afternoon, flipping through an iPad containing spreadsheets and project updates. "He's worried about losing momentum on the Boulder venture, especially now that other developers sense an opportunity to jump in." Ethan grimaced, rotating his ankle with a wince. "What exactly does he plan for the land near Boulder? Last time I checked, we were in negotiations to buy farmland and parcels around the foothills. A new luxury resort?" He trailed off, that pang of guilt returning. He remembered Maya's impassioned words about preserving the region's pristine beauty. Victor cleared his throat. "Yes, a luxury complex, though the final plans are flexible. Richard wants something high-end, probably a golf course, spa, private chalets, that sort of thing. It'd mean big money for the company." "And a big hit to the environment," Ethan muttered under his breath, mind drifting to Daniel Cruz's farm and the fragile ecosystem Maya had shown him. He recalled the evenings in her cabin, the scent of pine logs burning, her quiet confidence as she brewed herbal teas, her fierce love for those mountains. Thoughts of her tugged at his heart. Since the day they parted at the hospital, she hadn't answered his calls or texts. Anxious to respect her space, Ethan hadn't pressed too hard, but the silence gnawed at him. His phone vibrated just then. A message from Sarah's cafe popped up, reminding him to pick up a hamper of food if he needed it. Sarah had offered to help him out after overhearing from Tom Wilson that he was laid up. Ethan recognized the name. Sarah was Maya's closest friend. He typed a polite thank you and accepted her invitation to drop by once he was discharged. Later that week, he was finally cleared to leave, albeit with a crutch and instructions to be cautious on snowy sidewalks. Victor insisted on driving him to a comfortable downtown hotel. "You shouldn't be alone with that injury," he said. But Ethan surprised both of them by refusing. "Book me a room somewhere small, near Pearl Street," Ethan insisted. "Nothing fancy. I need to ground myself. And I need to see someone." He left the reason unspoken, but he could see from Victor's knowing look that the assistant had pieced it together. By dusk, Ethan found himself settled in a modest motel just off Pearl. Snow still lined the streets, though the city's plows had cleared most roads. He peered out the window at the passers-by, students, hikers, long-time Boulder residents, and felt an odd sense of displacement. After a year of corporate flights and penthouse meetings, the quiet hum of this mountain town felt both soothing and disorienting. The next morning, using his crutch for support, he set out for Sarah's cafe. The cold air stung his face, but he drank in the crispness as though it were a cleansing tonic. The cafe occupied a cozy corner building, its large windows frosted along the edges. Bells jingled when he pushed open the door, revealing a homey interior with chalkboard menus and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee. Sarah herself was bustling behind the counter, late 30s, warm smile, curly hair escaping a headscarf. She spotted Ethan immediately. "You must be the patient," she teased, her brown eyes flicking to the crutch. "Welcome to my humble establishment." Ethan returned her smile. "Thanks for letting me drop by. I really appreciate your offer." She ushered him to a corner booth, insisting he rest his leg. A waitress brought him a steaming mug of hot chocolate piled high with whipped cream, courtesy of the house. He looked around, noticing the local paintings on the walls. Mountain vistas, forests, wildlife scenes. His chest ached at the memory of seeing such sights firsthand with Maya. "So," Sarah said, sliding into the seat across from him, "I hear you're the stranger who ended up in Maya's cabin during the storm. Quite the story going around town." Her tone wasn't accusatory, more curious than anything else. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, that's me. I was lucky she found me. I'd have probably frozen to death out there." Sarah nodded, her expression kind. "Maya saved your life. That's how she is, always taking care of people, even if she pretends she's perfectly content alone." She sipped her coffee, eyeing him carefully. "But now I hear you might be part of that big real estate firm eyeing up Boulder. Folks are concerned. She's concerned." He looked down, exhaling. "It's complicated. I'm beginning to see the damage our projects can do. I want to change things from within, but I won't pretend it's easy. And Maya..." His voice caught. "I just want to explain everything to her. She won't return my calls." Sarah studied him in silence for a moment, then laid a gentle hand on his. "If you really mean what you say, you might just have a chance to make it right. But don't expect her to make it easy on you. She's been hurt before, by someone who used her passion for these mountains, and then left." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I won't give up," he murmured. "Not on her, and not on doing the right thing." Sarah watched him, as though weighing the sincerity in his eyes. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Come back tomorrow. Maybe I can help set something up. For now, try not to make more promises than you can keep." Leaving the cafe, Ethan breathed in the crisp air and felt the sting of cold on his cheeks. His leg throbbed with every step, but the real ache was in his chest, fueled by uncertainty and longing. He didn't know if Maya would ever forgive him for the half-truths and the reality of who he was, but for once, he was prepared to fight for something beyond profit margins and corporate success, a fight that, oddly enough, mattered more than any deal he'd ever struck. 2 days later, Ethan entered Sarah's cafe once more, carefully navigating the tables with his crutch. He'd traded his formal wool coat for a simpler down jacket, blending in better with Boulder's outdoorsy crowd. The cafe was busier than before, locals sipping steaming drinks and biting into fresh pastries while discussing the storm's aftermath. Sarah spotted him and waved him over to a table near the back. "I managed to reach Maya," she said quietly, leaning in. "She's coming by to pick up a supply order for her cabin. If you're here when she arrives, that's up to you. But I'm not promising fireworks." He inclined his head in gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah. That's more than I could have asked for." Time ticked by slowly as he sipped black coffee, rehearsing what he might say to Maya. His heart pounded at every jingle of the door. Finally, near noon, she stepped inside. A rush of cold air followed her, making the overhead bells chime. Dressed in her usual practical layers, jeans, hiking boots, a snug fleece, Maya looked around warily. Her eyes landed on Ethan, and for a second he glimpsed a flicker of the warmth he remembered. Then her face hardened. He stood, awkwardly, leaning on his crutch, and offered a tentative smile. "Maya." She acknowledged him with the barest nod, crossing to the counter to speak with Sarah. Her stance was guarded, arms folded. There was no sign of the vulnerable woman who'd read him her poetry by candlelight. Realizing they needed space, Sarah discreetly excused herself to the back storage room, leaving them alone in the cafe's hush. "I'm glad you're okay," Maya said finally, not meeting his gaze directly. "I heard from Tom you're staying in town." Ethan swallowed. "Yes, for a while. I wanted to—" He paused, struggling to form words that weren't laden with excuses. "I wanted to see you." "Explain everything." She snorted softly, though her anger seemed more hurt than hostile. "Explain that you're one of the Holloways who've been trying to buy up half of Boulder County for some mega resort." "Maya, I know how it looks," he began, keeping his voice low. "I won't deny that my father's approach to business is aggressive, but I'm not him. I never wanted to ruin the environment or displace farmers like Daniel Cruz. That's the truth." She set her jaw, her green eyes flashing. "Then why not tell me the moment we met who you were? At least give me the courtesy of knowing I was housing the same kind of developer I've fought against for years." "I didn't lie," he said, wincing at his own defensiveness. I didn't want you to see me as a threat. I've been questioning my role in the company for a while now. When I went to the mountains, it was to figure out if there was a way to do this job ethically or if I should step away entirely." Her shoulders relaxed a fraction, though her tone remained guarded. "You say that now, but words are cheap, Ethan." He nodded. "I know. That's why I'm staying here, for however long it takes, to prove I mean it." He cast a glance around the cafe, then leaned in. "I've already reached out to Daniel Cruz. I'd like to discuss a partnership that preserves his farmland instead of bulldozing it. I want to redesign the project into something sustainable, or scrap it altogether if that's not possible." Maya's eyes flickered with surprise, though she tried to mask it. "That's a tall order. The men in suits will see you as naive, or worse." Ethan managed a faint smile. "I've faced bigger boardroom battles. And at the end of the day, I'm the CEO. My father can throw a fit, but he can't single-handedly overrule me. Legally, I have enough shares to push a new direction. It'll be messy, but I'd rather have a messy fight than lose what I found up in that cabin." The vulnerability in his last words hung between them. Maya looked away, her jaw tightening again. "That's big talk," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. "What if you fail? Or what if you succeed and then vanish back to New York as soon as the dust settles?" He exhaled, resisting the urge to reach for her hand. "I don't have all the answers, but I'm not walking away from this fight. And I won't walk away from you if you'll let me stay in your life." She stared at him for a long moment, warring emotions clear in her eyes. At last, she shook her head slowly, looking pained. I can't just pretend these last few days haven't turned my world upside down. I need space, Ethan." The cafe door opened again, a flurry of cold air drifting in, as if punctuating her words. She scooped up a box of supplies Sarah had set on the counter, her expression clouded with heartbreak. "If you really care about Boulder and about me, you'll do the right thing, no matter how tough it gets." He nodded, swallowing down the urge to plead. "I will." Maya gave him one final conflicted glance before heading toward the exit. The bell jingled overhead as she walked out into the snow-bright afternoon. Ethan stood there, pulse roaring in his ears, wrestling with both frustration and a renewed determination. He had always been good at negotiating deals, but now he realized that winning back Maya's trust was the hardest negotiation of all, one that required more than empty words or charm. It demanded commitment and perhaps even sacrifice. After that tense encounter in the cafe, Maya threw herself into her old routines with double the intensity. Each morning, she packed up her gear before daybreak and led small groups of winter hikers along the safer trails. Her customers marveled at frozen waterfalls, snow-draped pine groves, and bright tracks left by deer or the occasional bobcat. But Maya barely registered the landscapes she loved. Her mind was a storm of its own, replaying every word Ethan had said. When the guided tours ended, she headed deeper into the mountain passes on her own. She told herself she was scouting new routes, yet the real purpose was to find solace in the solitude. The hush of the high peaks reminded her of the cabin's quiet after the electricity had gone out, only now she was alone by choice. One afternoon, she stopped by Daniel Cruz's farm on her way back to Boulder. Snow blanketed his fields, the skeletons of dormant plants poking through like silhouettes of a harvest that once was. Daniel, a broad-chested man in his 50s with lines of worry etched into his sun-tanned face, welcomed her with a weary nod. "Good to see you, Maya," he said, leading her into the cozy interior of his farmhouse. The warmth from the wood-burning stove made her cheeks prickle as they went through to the kitchen. "Coffee?" She accepted a mug, gazing around at photos of his parents and grandparents on the walls, generations of farmers who had tilled the land with their own hands. "How are things going, Daniel?" she asked, cradling the mug for heat. "I heard rumors you've been approached again by Holloway Developments." He set his cup down, sighing. "Yeah, but it was different this time. Not from the old man, Richard Holloway, but from Ethan. Got a call out of the blue a few days back. Said he wanted to talk about an alternative vision for the development. Something about sustainable agriculture, ecotourism, a kind of farm educational center. I nearly hung up, thinking it was a joke." Maya's chest tightened. She recalled Ethan's promise to her in the cafe that he meant to change course. "Did he come in person?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Daniel nodded. "He dropped by 2 evenings ago, limping on that crutch. We talked for hours. He seemed sincere, very different from the usual suits who flash money around and expect me to hand over my land. He was asking me what I needed, how a partnership might benefit everyone. I've never had a developer show me that level of respect before." Listening, Maya felt an ache in her chest. She was proud of Ethan for following through, yet that admiration was laced with lingering doubt. "Are you considering it?" Daniel shrugged. "It's a big step. I'm not naive. Even if Ethan's genuine, there are layers of corporate folks behind him, not to mention his father. But it's more promising than the all-or-nothing deal they first pitched." He studied Maya's face. "How do you feel about all this?" She hesitated, taking a slow sip of coffee to buy time. "I honestly don't know. I want to believe him, but part of me keeps waiting for a catch." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I get it. But if someone like him really wants to fight for a better approach, maybe we should give it a chance. Not everyone in the business world is a carbon copy of their family." Maya pressed her lips together, remembering her mother's disapproving frown, her father's distant eyes. She, too, had chosen a path starkly different from her parents' corporate ambitions. Maybe Ethan was fighting a similar battle. By the time she left Daniel's farm, the sun was dipping behind the mountains. The snow in the fields shimmered under the golden light, beautiful and unyielding. She pulled her coat tighter, her breath forming clouds in the chilly air. A wave of uncertainty swept over her. The man she'd sheltered from the storm was forging alliances with her community. Was it for her sake, or was this truly what he wanted? That evening, she received a call from her younger sister, Emma. Maya answered with a mixture of surprise and relief. Despite their distance, Emma's voice often soothed her. The background hum of ocean waves was faintly audible, reminding Maya of how different her sister's world in California was. "Hey sis," Emma greeted, sounding upbeat. "Just checking in. Heard you had quite the storm out there." Maya gave a soft laugh. "That's one way to put it. How are your marine biology studies?" "Good," Emma replied. "I'm actually writing a paper on coastal ecosystems. It's stressful, but I love it. What about you? I heard from Sarah that something happened, something about a guy who was hurt in the mountains." Maya grimaced, though Emma couldn't see her expression. "Yeah, Ethan, he's complicated." They talked for a while, circling around the details until Maya finally confessed the basics: how she'd found Ethan injured, the days they'd spent together in the cabin, his identity as a wealthy developer, and the confusion gripping her heart. Emma listened quietly, offering no judgments. "It sounds like you actually like him," Emma said finally, her tone gentle but curious. "But you're afraid." Maya felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. "I was humiliated when David left me. Part of me can't shake the fear that Ethan will do the same. And then there's the bigger picture, our community, Daniel's farm, the environment. What if he backtracks?" Emma let out a soft hum. "Fear is normal, Maya. But sometimes, trusting someone or giving them a chance to show they've changed can lead to something really good. I know you have strong instincts. Trust them." After they hung up, Maya stood on her porch, gazing at the distant peaks illuminated by moonlight. Emma's words echoed in her mind. Maybe it was time to confront the silence inside her, the quiet space where hope had once lived, now overshadowed by past betrayals. If Ethan was genuine, if he was truly fighting for the same ideals she'd championed her entire adult life, did she have the courage to let him prove it? She closed her eyes, inhaling the crisp mountain air. The hush of the heights reminded her that nature existed in a delicate balance of forces. Sometimes, letting something new grow meant risking an avalanche of change. With the cold wind nipping at her cheeks, she wondered if she was ready to break her own silence and open the door Ethan had cautiously been knocking on. A week later, Maya arrived at the community meeting unannounced. The gathering was held in a modest event hall near the edge of town, where ranchers, business owners, and local activists often convened to discuss Boulder's future. Rows of folding chairs formed a haphazard circle, and a fold-out table at the front displayed pamphlets about sustainable farming, protected habitats, and real estate planning. The chatter in the room quieted when she walked in, with several familiar faces offering polite nods. Daniel Cruz stood by the stage, arms crossed. Tom Wilson was there too, wearing his park ranger uniform, exchanging concerned whispers with a few council members. And then there was Ethan. He stood at the front, leaning on his crutch, speaking to a small group of townspeople. Maya's stomach clenched at the sight of him in a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal his bandaged forearm. He looked different from the polished CEOs she'd encountered, more earnest, less guarded. A large sketchboard behind him displayed architectural designs that seemed to blend farmland, eco-lodges, and hiking paths. When he noticed Maya, his posture grew tense. Their eyes locked briefly, and he gave the smallest nod, as though acknowledging her presence without presuming her support. She found a seat in the back, heart thumping, unsure what to expect. Once everyone settled, Ethan cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming," he began, voice slightly unsteady. "My name is Ethan Holloway, CEO of Holloway Developments. I know many of you have concerns about what our projects might do to Boulder's environment and local livelihoods." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Richard Holloway was conspicuously absent. Maya noted. Maybe that was for the best. The older man's reputation for ruthlessness preceded him. Ethan continued, pointing to the sketches. "In the last few weeks, I've had a chance to speak with Daniel Cruz and some of you about a different approach. One that isn't just about building a luxury resort. Instead, we're proposing a partnership with local farmers and environmental experts to create something that respects the land." Think of it as an educational farm with eco-friendly lodging, so tourists can learn about sustainable agriculture and conservation while enjoying the beauty of the Rockies. An older rancher raised his hand. That sounds nice on paper, son, but where's the profit in that? Don't those fancy resorts make money from big-ticket amenities? Ethan gave a small smile. True, the return on investment might be smaller at first. But there's a growing market for ecotourism and hands-on experiences. We can tap into that. Plus, preserving the character of Boulder will benefit everyone in the long run, including local businesses. Tourists come here because it's unique. If we destroy that, we lose what makes Boulder special. Daniel chimed in, voice resonant with cautious optimism. He's right. I've seen the numbers. This could be a sustainable model, focusing on smaller-scale lodging, guided farm tours, workshops on organic practices, and a network of hiking trails designed to minimize impact on wildlife. Tom Wilson crossed his arms, studying Ethan critically. What about your father? He's been known to push for maximum returns at any cost. Ethan paused, a flicker of tension crossing his features. My father and I disagree on this direction. But the fact is, I have equal or greater shares than him. If I can convince the rest of the board, we can override his objections. It won't be easy, and there may be legal battles ahead. His gaze swept the room. I'm asking for your trust, or at least the chance to earn it. I want to prove that big development doesn't have to mean reckless expansion. Silence followed. Maya's heart pounded. She could see the mix of skepticism and cautious hope on people's faces. Steeling herself, she rose from her seat. All eyes turned to her, especially Ethan's. Maya, Daniel said quietly, you have something to add? She swallowed, feeling her throat tighten. We all know how these mountains can draw people in with their beauty, and we've seen outsiders come in, exploit what they can, and leave us to pick up the pieces. But I've also seen how people can change, how they can learn to respect the land if guided the right way. She glanced at Ethan, her voice trembling. I'm not saying we should give unconditional trust, but maybe we give him a shot at doing this the right way. A rustle of conversation moved through the crowd. Tom nodded thoughtfully, and Sarah, standing by the door, smiled at Maya, relief evident in her eyes. Ethan cleared his throat again, his expression sober. Thank you for that. I know I have a lot to prove, to you all, and to Maya most of all. He took a shaky breath. So here's my proposal. A signed agreement that if we fail to meet certain sustainability benchmarks, protecting farmland, limiting deforestation, ensuring fair compensation for local partners, then we pull out. No hidden clauses, no land grabs. If we don't make this work responsibly, we leave. A few people whistled low, surprised at his boldness. One of the council members raised an eyebrow. That's a strong commitment, Ethan nodded, scanning the room. I'm willing to put it in writing. Holloway developments can't keep destroying the very places we claim to value. As murmurs of approval and cautious questions rippled through the hall, Maya studied Ethan's face, his earnestness, the flicker of nerves. She recalled the stolen moments in the cabin, the confessions shared by candlelight, the heartbreak when she discovered his identity. Part of her still feared being hurt again. But seeing him stand here, publicly risking his father's wrath and corporate backlash, ignited a fragile hope. Ethan met her gaze across the crowd, an unspoken question shining in his eyes. Are you with me? She managed the tiniest nod. If she had learned anything from the storm that trapped them both, it was that some bonds, once formed, deserved a fair chance to weather whatever came next. And for the first time since he'd left her cabin, Maya felt a sense of calm, like the hush that follows a passing tempest, promising a clearer sky ahead. Ethan Holloway carefully adjusted the lapel of his charcoal grey blazer, feeling tension coil in his shoulders as he surveyed the imposing glass facade of Holloway Development's Denver office. The building stood as a testament to the empire his father had built, one that Ethan was now determined to transform. A sharp gust of winter wind bit at his cheeks, reminding him how far he'd come from that stormy cabin in the Rockies. He leaned on his crutch and exhaled, bracing himself for the battle ahead. Inside, the sleek lobby was all polished marble and steel accents. A few employees offered polite nods, clearly curious to see the CEO hobbling on a crutch. But Ethan pressed forward, determined. Victor Reynolds, his assistant, waited near the elevators, tapping his tablet nervously. "Mr. Holloway, the board is already convened," Victor said, voice low. "Your father arrived 10 minutes ago with several of his allies." Ethan nodded, stepping into the elevator. "Then let's not keep them waiting." On the top floor, the conference room doors loomed, frosted glass with the Holloway Developments logo emblazoned in silver. Through the glass, Ethan saw the board members seated around a long table, men and women in tailored suits, heads bent over tablets and documents. At the head of the table sat Richard Holloway, his posture rigid, his dark suit pressed to perfection, steel grey hair impeccably combed. The older man's presence seemed to chill the air itself. As Ethan and Victor entered, conversation ceased. All eyes turned to the newcomer who'd shaken up the company's direction over the past weeks. The hush was thick with tension. Ethan cleared his throat and moved to the front, carefully resting his crutch against a chair before facing the assembled executives. "Good morning," he began, keeping his tone steady. "I called this meeting to address the future of our Boulder project. Specifically, I want to propose a formal shift in our development plans, away from the standard luxury resort model and toward a sustainable, community-focused approach." Before he could continue, Richard Holloway raised a hand. "We've been patient with your recent ambitions, Ethan," he said, voice smooth yet icy. "But let's remember, our primary obligation is to our shareholders. We can't jeopardize the company's profitability on the whim of an environmental fad." Ethan's jaw tightened. "This isn't a fad, Father. It's a legitimate market shift. Ecotourism is growing, and Boulder's unique natural setting deserves respect. We have an opportunity to create something that's both profitable and responsible." A restless murmur swept through the room. Alexandra Reeves, one of the few female board members, leaned forward. "I've reviewed the preliminary numbers Ethan shared. They suggest that while initial profit margins might be smaller, the long-term gains could be substantial. Lower environmental impact often means better relations with local authorities, which can lead to reduced legal costs, fewer protests, and a stronger brand image." Richard's gaze shifted to Alexandra, a flicker of disapproval on his face. "In theory, perhaps, but our investors expect clear, immediate returns. The Boulder project was never meant to be an experiment." Ethan inhaled, drawing on the memories of snowy nights and heartfelt conversations with Maya. He pictured Daniel Cruz's farmland and the sketches he'd painstakingly reworked to preserve open space. "I understand the concerns about immediate profit, but the old approach, buying up large swaths of land, bulldozing and building a 5-star resort, comes with high environmental and social risks. Public backlash, lawsuits, and local government pushback can cost millions. We've seen it before in other states. A sustainable model aligns with changing consumer values. People want authenticity and eco-friendly credentials." He flicked through slides on a large screen, showing revised architectural renderings, small, eco-conscious lodges tucked among the trees, farmland tours integrated with cabins, and educational centers that highlighted local conservation efforts. He explained that forging partnerships with residents would reduce resistance, saving the company time and legal expenses. For a moment, the board members studied the images, some looking intrigued. Richard Holloway's mask of composure cracked only slightly, revealing a flicker of annoyance. He pressed his palms on the table. "You're proposing we risk everything on a half-baked ideal. If you want to indulge this romantic vision of the mountains, do it on your own time." "Holloway Developments has a legacy to uphold." Ethan's heart pounded, but he kept his voice measured. "I respect our legacy, but that legacy won't survive if we become a relic of outdated, exploitative practices. This is the future. Sustainability, collaboration, leaving spaces better than we found them." A man in his 50s, Leonard Price, cleared his throat. "Ethan, you have the power to pivot us in a new direction, but the board has to vote on major shifts. It's risky, especially with a large capital investment already in place." Ethan glanced around the table, meeting each member's gaze in turn. "I'm prepared to put my own share of equity on the line to support this. If it fails, I bear the financial consequences personally, not the company." He paused to let that settle in. "But if it succeeds, we open a new avenue for Holloway Developments, one that can be replicated in other scenic locales. We'll be leaders, not dinosaurs." Richard's voice cut through the hush. "You're gambling with money, resources, and the reputation I spent decades building." Ethan met his father's glare evenly. "I'm working to preserve the world we develop in so that legacy can last for future generations. That's not a gamble. It's an investment in tomorrow." Silence stretched. Finally, Alexandra Reeves cleared her throat. "I move that we schedule a formal vote on Ethan's proposal in 2 days. That gives us time to review the revised data and ask additional questions." One by one, the board members murmured agreement. Richard leaned back, lips set in a taut line. "Fine," he bit out. 2 days, but don't expect an easy ride." The meeting adjourned, tension lingering. As Ethan gathered his notes, Richard brushed past him, voice low. "You have no idea what you're doing," he hissed. "I won't let you drag this company down on some idealistic whim." Ethan swallowed, forcing himself not to flinch. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Father. I'm changing the rules of the game." Richard gave a derisive snort and strode away. Alone by the window, Ethan exhaled shakily, staring at Denver's skyline. He felt both exhilarated and terrified. The real fight was just beginning, and he had staked not just his fortune, but his newfound sense of purpose on this bold gamble. If he won, he'd secure more than a business victory. He'd prove to Maya and to himself that the right path was worth every risk. Maya gripped the steering wheel of her Jeep, eyes flicking between the slick mountain road ahead and the ominous clouds gathering overhead. Though winter had started to loosen its grip, an unexpected cold front threatened to drop fresh snow in the higher elevations. She sighed, recalling how she once thrived on these winding roads, the thrill of being alone with nature. Lately, her heart felt heavier, torn between the solace of isolation and the quiet longing to trust someone again. She'd agreed to meet Ethan near the trail where she'd originally found him, a spot now etched in her memory. He'd called earlier, voice tentative but resolute, asking if she could spare an afternoon to show him more of the land he hoped to protect. She'd hesitated but finally relented, curiosity overriding her wariness. Pulling into a small dirt clearing, she spotted Ethan's SUV, the engine still running to provide heat. He stepped out carefully, leaning on his crutch. There was a raw earnestness in his eyes that made her breath catch. Despite herself, she felt a flicker of warmth at the sight of him wrapped in a simple coat, hair mussed by the biting wind. "You made it," he said quietly, managing a small, relieved smile. Maya nodded, stuffing her hands in her pockets. "Figured it was time we talked, away from meeting rooms and prying eyes." She gestured toward the path leading into the pines. "I thought we could take a short walk, but it might be challenging with your leg. Ethan tested the stability of his crutch on the packed snow. I'm doing better than I was a month ago. If you lead, I'll follow. They set off slowly, the air crisp and laced with the scent of pine resin. The trail wound through clusters of evergreens, their needles blanketed in a fine powder. Maya navigated easily, scanning for icy patches. Ethan followed her cautious steps, wincing occasionally, but pressing forward. Their breaths formed small clouds in the chilly air. At a bend in the trail, they reached a viewpoint overlooking a frozen creek. Sunlight broke through a gap in the clouds, illuminating the snow-capped peaks in the distance. The landscape radiated a silent majesty. Maya paused, letting Ethan catch his breath. "It's beautiful," he murmured, eyes traveling over the winding creek below. "Sometimes I forget how breathtaking it is out here." Maya leaned against a spruce trunk, gaze distant. "That's why I fight so hard to protect it. Once it's gone, you can't rebuild it with money." Ethan's features softened. "I don't want to be the reason any of this disappears, Maya, I promise you. The board meets soon to vote on the new plan. My father is furious, but I'm moving forward regardless." She studied him, searching for cracks in his determination. "You think you can sway them?" He shrugged, exhaling a slow breath. "It's possible I have some support. I'm also prepared to use my shares as leverage. If it comes down to it, I'll buy out my father's stake. It might ruin our relationship, but I won't compromise on this." The raw conviction in his voice sent a tremor through Maya. She looked away, focusing on a chickadee fluttering between branches. "You said something similar at the community meeting," she managed. "I'm just not used to seeing someone follow through on big promises." He inched closer, boots crunching on the snow. "I know, and you have every right to doubt me, but I've started drawing up contracts with Daniel Cruz, with local environmental groups. I'm not backing out." A wry smile tugged at his lips. "Turns out, real estate law can be a force for good, or at least something better if you push hard enough." Maya's heart twisted. She remembered how David once sweet-talked her with dreams of a sustainable project, only to exploit her knowledge and vanish. A part of her wanted so badly to believe Ethan was different. "There's a cost to fighting for this," she said, voice trembling slightly. "Your father might cut you off. The board could oust you. And if it fails, you could lose your fortune." He nodded, stepping beside her to peer over the overlook railing. "That's true. But after what we went through in that cabin, I realized I can't keep living a life that doesn't align with what I believe in or who I want to be. And if I lose the company, at least I lose it on my terms." She was silent for a moment, wrestling with emotions too tangled to pass. Then, in a voice almost lost to the wind, she asked, "And what about me? Am I just part of this new outlook? What happens if the board meeting goes well, you secure your project, and then you return to New York?" His gaze shot to hers, sincere and vulnerable. "You're not a footnote in my life, Maya. You never were. If this project succeeds, I'm moving part of my operations here. I want a life in Boulder, not just an office in Manhattan. Working remotely is possible. Plenty of CEOs do it, or I'll step down if that's what it takes to stay. I don't want to leave you behind." Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, the admission unearthing a buried longing for someone who would choose her world over relentless ambition. She swallowed. "I don't need you to give up everything, but I won't uproot myself for the city either." He reached out, taking her hand in a gentle, tentative grasp. The warmth of his palm contrasted with the chill of the air. "I'm not asking you to give up anything. I want to build a bridge between our worlds." He gestured at the valley below. "Imagine a place where we preserve this landscape while welcoming visitors, where local guides like you lead them, teaching them respect for the wild, where farmers like Daniel thrive, not barely survive. The creek below sparkled under the hesitant sun, and for a moment the mountains themselves seemed to hold their breath. Maya inhaled, letting his words settle. Maybe, just maybe, she could believe in him. She squeezed his hand, feeling the fragile bud of hope sprouting once more. "All right," she whispered, voice catching. "I'll stand by you if you stand by this land and by me." Ethan's eyes lit with relief. He gently lifted her hand, brushing his lips across her knuckles. "I promise." They watched the sun dip behind a peak, the sky streaked with pale gold. A hush fell, broken only by the distant rush of the creek. Standing at this crossroads, Maya sensed the magnitude of what lay ahead. They would face battles, family ties, board votes, personal fears, but perhaps together they could weather any storm, forging a path that honored both love and the land they cherished. Ethan returned to the Denver office early the next morning, heart still buoyed by his conversation with Maya. Victor greeted him in the lobby with grim news. Richard Holloway had called for a private meeting. No board members, no legal teams, just father and son. "Be careful," Victor advised, tapping his own phone screen anxiously. "He's in a mood." Ethan squared his shoulders. "I can handle him." He took the elevator to the executive suite. The door to his father's corner office stood ajar, revealing floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Denver's skyline. Richard sat at a mahogany desk, hands folded, posture as rigid as the black suit he wore. Without waiting for an invitation, Ethan entered, placing his crutch aside and easing into the leather chair opposite the desk. Richard's gaze flicked to the crutch, then to Ethan's still healing leg. "I see you're well enough to storm the boardroom," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Ethan ignored the barb. "You wanted to talk privately. Let's talk." For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the city below. Then Richard stood, crossing to the window, arms behind his back. "I built this company from nothing, Ethan. While you were off at college, I was forging deals, expanding into markets that no one else dared touch. And now you waltz in, ready to dismantle it all with childish idealism." "It's not dismantling," Ethan countered, keeping his tone measured. "It's modernizing. The world has changed. Our methods need to change too, or we'll become irrelevant." Richard turned, a flicker of anger lighting his eyes. "Irrelevant. We've made billions in profit, employing thousands of people. Don't you dare lecture me on irrelevance." Ethan swallowed, determined to remain calm. "I'm not dismissing what you've achieved, but success shouldn't come at the cost of destroying communities and habitats. We have enough capital to invest in sustainable projects, ones that could still be profitable, but also ethical. You taught me that business is about winning. Well, this is how we win in the future." His father's mouth thinned, deep lines etching across his forehead. "If you continue down this path, you'll lose everything. The board vote might favor you if you twist enough arms, but investors will flee when they see smaller, long-term returns. Stock prices will plummet. Your grand ideas could bankrupt us. Then where will you be? Where will Holloway Development stand?" Ethan felt a stab of guilt. He had no illusions this would be easy, but thoughts of Maya's unwavering gaze, of Daniel Cruz's relief at a possible partnership, steeled his resolve. "If we do nothing, in a decade, we might be the ones who fail. The public is becoming more environmentally conscious. Look at the boycotts other major developers have faced. Our brand reputation is fragile. One massive protest, one social media campaign, and we could lose more than money. We could lose credibility." His father's fists clenched at his sides. "I've spent decades building credibility with the people who matter. Bankers, investors, government officials. Not mountain guides and farmers who can't see beyond their patch of land." Ethan bristled. "You think they don't matter? Those mountain guides and farmers are the reason people come to places like Boulder. They're the soul of these regions. If we strip that away, we're left with empty buildings. Silence fell. Richard stared at his son, a mix of disbelief and contempt flickering across his expression. At last, he returned to his chair, leaning forward. I won't watch you destroy my life's work. This is my ultimatum. Withdraw your proposal before the board meets again, or I will do everything in my power to remove you as CEO, even if it means dissolving the company to protect what's mine. A chill coursed down Ethan's spine. He had guessed his father might threaten him, but hearing the words forced a new level of reality into the situation. You'd go that far. You'd tear down everything just to keep me from changing it. Richard's voice was ice. I'd rather burn it all to the ground than let it become a laughingstock. You have two choices: step back and preserve our empire, or push forward and watch it crumble. Ethan leaned in, eyes locked on his father's. You always told me the Holloway name stands for ambition. Well, my ambition is to build something that lasts, not just in steel and glass, but in the respect of the communities where we operate. I won't back down. Richard's jaw tensed, his knuckles white against the desk. Then you leave me no choice, he hissed, voice trembling with barely contained fury. When the board votes, I'll block you with every weapon I have. If I lose, I'll sue. If that fails, I'll liquidate shares. You'll have nothing. Despite the dread pooling in his stomach, Ethan rose, gripping his crutch for support. I guess we'll see. But I'm done living in fear of you. He turned and exited, leaving Richard Holloway behind the vast mahogany desk, shadowed by the skyline he'd conquered. Stepping into the corridor, Ethan's heart pounded. His father's ultimatum was a stark reminder of the stakes. Still, he felt no urge to retreat. The mountains, the promise he'd made to Maya, and the vision he had for a new kind of development all propelled him forward. He'd gone too far to turn back now. Maya paced her cabin, the flicker of firelight dancing across the wooden walls. A tension had settled in her chest ever since she'd gotten Ethan's text. We need to talk. Urgent. She wasn't sure whether to brace for bad news or a breakthrough. Outside, a blanket of stars arched over the silent mountains, the moonlight reflecting off old drifts of snow. When a firm knock came at the door, she pulled it open to find Ethan standing there in worn jeans and a warm jacket, his crutch propped under one arm. His expression was a mix of exhaustion and determination. She stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. You look like you've been through the ringer, she observed, closing the door behind him. He exhaled shakily, nodding. I have been. My father gave me an ultimatum. Drop the sustainable plan or he'll tear the company apart. The board vote is in 2 days, and he's threatening to sue, liquidate shares, anything to undermine me. Maya's stomach twisted. She gestured toward the worn couch. Sit, I'll get you something hot. He settled onto the cushions with a grimace, resting his crutch against the coffee table. The familiar surroundings, her shelves of dried herbs, the pictures pinned to the log walls, brought back memories of the storm, of the fragile intimacy they'd built in this very space. Maya busied herself heating water on the propane stove, tossing in some chamomile for calm. Ethan watched her, his eyes shadowed. I'm sorry to barge in so late. I just needed to see you. She poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs. It's fine. Better here than some sterile hotel room in Denver. She handed him a mug and sank onto a stool across from him. So, what does all this mean for the Boulder Project? He blew on the tea, his voice taut. It means if the board sides with me, my father will declare war. If they side with him, everything we've worked for falls apart. He might push forward with the old plan, bulldozing farmland, building that resort. Or he could sabotage the project entirely just to spite me. His eyes flicked up, meeting hers. I won't let that happen, though. I've come too far. The fire crackled, the only sound for a few moments. Maya clasped her hands around her mug, aware of the vulnerability in his voice. He rarely showed how deeply this battle affected him. You said, "We've worked for—" She noted gently. I appreciate that, but I haven't done much besides voice support at the community meeting. He shook his head. That's not true. You gave me the push to fight for this at all. If I hadn't experienced life up here with you, realizing there's more than corporate deals, I'd never have had the courage to defy my father. He took a slow sip, then set the mug aside. Maya, I meant it when I said I want to build a life here, with you. But I understand if all this chaos makes you want to run the other way. Her chest tightened. Fear fluttered in her belly. She recalled how David's broken promises had made her flee to these mountains in the first place. But Ethan's honesty was different, less polished, more raw. I won't lie, she said softly. I'm scared, but that doesn't mean I want you to give up. I just wish there was an easier path. A mirthless chuckle escaped him. Me too. But nothing worthwhile is easy, right? He leaned forward, gaze urgent. If the board vote goes in my favor, I'll have to restructure a lot of the company's operations, possibly face lawsuits. I might be traveling between New York and Boulder often. And if it goes badly, I don't know what my future looks like. Maya set her mug down, crossing the small space to sit beside him on the couch. I think I speak for many here when I say that Boulder needs people willing to protect what makes this place special. I won't stand in your way. If anything, I want to help. Ethan's eyes shone with gratitude. He reached out tentatively, and she let him take her hand. The simple contact stirred memories of that near kiss they'd shared by the fireplace during the storm. You have no idea how much that means to me, he said, voice husky. I feel like I'm fighting every demon from my past, from my father's control to my own doubts. Knowing you're in my corner, it gives me strength. Warmth washed through her, and impulsively, she shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat like that for a while, the only sound the soft pop of embers in the fireplace. The vulnerability between them felt like a fragile truce with their own past wounds. Eventually, Ethan broke the silence. I should tell you something else. His voice trembled. If the board sides with me, I might buy out my father's shares. It'll cost a fortune, but I can sell certain assets. I'll lose a chunk of my net worth, but at least I'll have control. And then... He turned to look at her. Then I want to channel more resources into the educational center you once dreamed of. The idea that first brought you and David together before he betrayed you. Maya's heart lurched, tears pricking her eyes. She had shared that dream so sparingly since David shattered her trust. Yet here Ethan was, offering to resurrect it on a scale she'd never imagined. I don't know what to say, she whispered. He squeezed her hand. Just say you'll think about it. That you'll let me stand beside you this time, not overshadow you or steal your ideas, but truly collaborate. Emotion welled up, and she blinked rapidly. I'll think about it, she breathed, and thank you. They lapsed into quiet, letting the whirling storm of their worries settle. The warmth of the cabin and the solace of each other's presence wrapped around them like a gentle shield. It was a night of confessions, of bearing truths too long hidden in the shadows. Despite the looming threats, they found a sliver of peace here, together, at the edge of what might become a brand new horizon. Board vote day dawned with a pale sun rising over Denver's skyline. The morning sky streaked in wintry pink and blue. Ethan left his downtown motel room early, double-checking the documents in his briefcase. Each page represented weeks of negotiations, projections, and newly formed alliances, his best attempt to ensure Holloway Developments pivoted towards sustainable development. In the hallway, Victor waited, handing him a strong coffee. "You're ready for this?" Victor asked, a note of genuine concern in his voice. Ethan nodded, taking a grateful sip. Ready as I'll ever be. They arrived at the boardroom half an hour before the scheduled meeting. One by one, the directors filtered in, Alexandra Reeves, Leonard Price, and the rest. Their expressions ranged from polite curiosity to guarded skepticism. Finally, Richard Holloway appeared, regal in a dark suit, jaw set in a disapproving line. He took his customary seat at the head of the table, leaving Ethan to stand near the presentation screen. Ethan cleared his throat, powering through the flutter of nerves. Thank you all for being here. I've compiled the final version of our bolder proposal. You'll see that it involves partnering with local landowners, adopting eco-tourism principles, and creating a pilot project that can be replicated elsewhere. Our research suggests stable long-term profitability, with reduced legal and PR risks compared to traditional large-scale developments. Clicking through slides, he showed projections of break-even points, potential revenue streams, and endorsements from local community leaders, including Daniel Cruz. The final slide displayed an agreement that if certain benchmarks, like environmental impact assessments, weren't met, Holloway Developments would withdraw. It was an extraordinary guarantee in corporate real estate. The board members began asking questions, some sharp, others genuine. Alexandra inquired about brand positioning. Leonard asked about supply chain costs. A few grilled Ethan on timeline viability. Calmly, he addressed each concern, buoyed by the knowledge he'd done his homework. Then Richard broke in, voice dripping with derision. We've heard your idealistic spiel, Ethan. Now let's talk reality. He turned to the others. Our father-son conflict shouldn't obscure the facts. This new approach delays revenue, requires more capital investment, and yields a smaller profit margin, which means our shareholders see smaller dividends. Is that what we want for Holloway Developments? Ethan kept his voice steady. Short-term sacrifices for long-term stability. And beyond that, we keep our reputation intact, which matters in a world that's increasingly critical of exploitative practices. That's what I'm offering, a future that isn't just about the next quarter's earnings. Richard's eyes narrowed. I have a counter-proposal. We continue with the original resort plan, guaranteed to be profitable in under 2 years. We've done it a dozen times in other locations. The shareholders get quicker returns, and we don't risk untested experiments. He spread his hands theatrically. Why fix what isn't broken? A hush fell. Ethan looked around at the board members, searching for signs of support. Alexandra pursed her lips, hesitant. Leonard shifted uncomfortably. Another director cleared his throat. Mr. Holloway Sr., with respect, the world is changing, and we've been seeing increased public pushback on certain projects. Maybe your son has a point. Richard's nostrils flared, but he kept his composure. We'll put it to a vote, he stated, looking at Ethan. Majority decides whether we proceed with your scheme or revert to the proven plan. A sense of finality gripped the room. The directors exchanged glances, each perhaps wary of antagonizing the company's founder. Yet Ethan saw a few glimmers of encouragement. Alexandra raised her hand first. I vote in favor of Ethan's proposal. The research is solid, and I believe adapting to sustainable practices is the future. Leonard's turn came next. He looked between Richard and Ethan. I've been on this board for 20 years. I've seen the industry shift drastically. I vote with Ethan. A third member voted no, claiming it was too risky. Another echoed Richard's stance, citing short-term profit concerns. As the tally continued, the board split down the middle, each vote inching the final outcome closer to a deadlock. Sweat beaded on Ethan's brow. If the vote ended in a tie, his father could effectively block the plan. At last, all eyes turned to the final director, an older man named Harold Bennett, who rarely spoke but held a significant number of shares. He tapped his pen against the table, glancing at the projected slides. Then he murmured, "I've known Richard Holloway a long time. I respect him immensely, but I also see potential in Ethan's vision. Our brand can't survive perpetual controversy. I vote yes for Ethan's plan." Ethan's heart surged. Relief cascaded through him as the votes tallied one more for his proposal, sealing a majority. Victor exhaled audibly behind him, shoulders sagging with shared relief. Even Alexandra smiled, looking triumphant. But Richard's face hardened into a thunderous scowl. "This is a mistake, a catastrophic mistake," he snapped, voice echoing in the silent room. "I've carried this company to greatness, and you ungrateful sycophants choose to follow a dreamer." Ethan stepped forward, aware this was the moment of truth. "We're choosing a sustainable future, Father. If you can't see that, I'm sorry." Richard shoved back his chair. "Then you leave me no choice. I'll be selling my shares to the highest bidder, or perhaps simply destroying their value on the open market." He threw a venomous glare around the table. "You'll regret this." Without another word, he stormed out, the door slamming behind him. A hush lingered, tension vibrating in the wake of his outburst. Slowly, Ethan faced the board. "Thank you," he managed, throat tight. "I know this wasn't an easy decision, but I promise you, we'll make this work, and we'll be proud we chose to adapt." The board adjourned, some members drifting toward Ethan with congratulatory handshakes, others hurrying away to soothe any fallout. Finally, only Ethan and Victor remained in the echoing conference room. "You did it," Victor said, voice hushed with awe. "You actually did it." Ethan let out a shaky laugh, feeling the enormity of what had just happened. He had won, yet the victory was bittersweet, overshadowed by his father's menacing vow. "We're not out of the woods yet," he murmured, "but at least we have a chance to build something real." Grabbing his crutch, he headed toward the elevator, mind already racing with everything that needed to be done. Legal documents to secure, partnerships to cement, media statements to craft. But first, he needed to tell Maya. She deserved to hear it from him, to know that their vision for a better Boulder had prevailed, if only by the slimmest margin. As he exited the building, the winter sun gleamed off the windows, almost blinding him. He paused, a surge of gratitude filling his chest. For the first time, the glare felt like a beacon rather than an obstacle, lighting the way toward a future he believed in, one he hoped to share with the woman who taught him what truly mattered among the peaks and pine forests of the Colorado mountains. A bitter wind scoured the parking lot outside Denver International Airport, lifting stray scraps of paper and sending them skittering across the asphalt. Maya pulled her heavy coat tighter and watched Ethan Holloway limp toward the terminal doors, his crutch clicking rhythmically on the frozen ground. Despite the new sense of possibility that had bloomed between them, a pang of sadness clutched her chest. "You really have to go?" she asked quietly, trying not to let her voice quaver. He nodded, pausing to reposition his grip on the crutch. The bruises from his father's threats still felt fresh. Legal documents signed, new partnerships forged, and a fracturing family business dynamic all weighed heavily on his mind. "I need to finalize things in New York," he said gently. "Tie up loose ends, reassure the board members who stayed on my side, and make sure my father can't sabotage the new project from within." Maya swallowed. A part of her was proud of him for confronting such formidable challenges. Another part dreaded the distance that would grow once he was gone. She forced a small smile. "Well, hurry back. We've still got a lot of planning for that eco-farm project. Daniel Cruz is eager to get started, and the local conservation groups are waiting to see real progress." He returned her smile, though a crease of worry lingered around his eyes. "I promise I won't stay away any longer than necessary," he murmured, stepping closer. The overhead lights illuminated flecks of golden brown in his hair, a reminder of how different he looked from the polished businessman she had once imagined him to be. They stood there, an island of warmth in the otherwise bustling cold. The airport's loudspeakers announced delayed flights and gate changes, but neither moved. Finally, Ethan set his free hand lightly on her shoulder. "Thank you for believing in me," he said, "for giving me a chance to do the right thing." Maya reached up to cover his hand with hers, feeling the familiar brush of calluses and healing scars. A memory flashed, the first time she'd ever touched him, out there in the snow as he lay injured and vulnerable. "Just don't forget to call," she managed, forcing a playful tone. "Long distance can get lonely." His expression gentled. "I'll call every day, text, send carrier pigeons if I have to. I'm not letting you slip away again." They embraced, the warmth of his coat mingling with hers, the hum of travelers swirling around them. Maya's heart clenched at the thought of letting him board a plane and fly halfway across the country, but she also recognized the necessity of it. He had to stand firm in New York if their shared vision was to survive, and if he was to prove that his promises were more than words. A soft beep from Ethan's phone signaled the arrival of his flight information. He sighed, pulling back. "I guess that's my cue," he murmured. "I'll see you soon." She nodded, eyes prickling. "Go, before I change my mind and tackle you." With an uneven laugh, he carefully shouldered his bag and started inside. Maya lingered at the door, watching his figure recede into the bright fluorescence of the terminal. Around her, the wind gusted again, pulling at her coat. She felt both bereft and oddly relieved. She had insisted on this separation after all. They needed time to make sure the feelings they'd cultivated weren't just byproducts of the storm and the crisis that followed. In truth, she yearned for reassurance, that their bond would hold strong despite the distance and the demands of their contrasting lives. Bracing herself, she walked back to her jeep and cranked the engine. The radio crackled with static before settling on a local news station, discussing the abrupt shift at Holloway Developments, Ethan's triumph in the boardroom, rumored tensions with his father, and speculation on how a green pivot would affect corporate profits. Maya listened, shaking her head at the cold tone of the commentators. They had no idea about the emotional and moral battles behind those decisions, how each choice weighed on the shoulders of one man who had chosen to defy a legacy. On the drive home, she couldn't help replaying every conversation she and Ethan had shared since the night of his surprise visit to her cabin. She remembered his pained confession of needing to do right by Boulder. She recalled the gentle way he'd told her of his plan to partially relocate, bridging the gap between city and mountain. The future seemed suddenly vast, open, and daunting. By the time she reached her cabin, dusk had settled over the Rockies. The porch creaked under her boots as she climbed the steps, the same spot where she'd once dragged Ethan to safety in a swirling blizzard. Inside, she lit the fire, taking comfort in the familiar glow of the hearth. Grabbing her phone, she sent him a quick message. "Safe travels. I'll be here. Don't keep me waiting too long." His reply came almost immediately. "I won't. Thinking of you already." Maya's lips curved into a faint smile. She set the phone aside, letting her gaze wander over the space that had once felt so lonely. A subtle flicker of optimism took root inside her. The time apart would be their test, of patience, of trust, and of the fragile hope that had begun in a cabin during a raging storm. A month of phone calls and video chats crawled by. Maya spent her days guiding tourists along safer springtime trails and evenings working on proposals for the new farm education center. Each night, she'd fall asleep to the sound of Ethan's voice on the other end of the line, often exhausted from corporate battles, but determined to hear about her day, no matter how mundane. Despite the distance, their bond felt unexpectedly tangible. She could almost sense his presence when she checked her phone for messages in the morning. He'd text her pictures of city skylines, half-finished architectural sketches, or sometimes just a simple good night. More than once, she found herself pressing her palm to the screen, wishing she could cross the miles in an instant. Sarah, her closest friend, teased her about pining like a teenager, but also offered unwavering support. One afternoon at the cafe, Sarah set a cup of chamomile tea in front of Maya and asked, "So, any sign of him coming back soon? I'm running out of jokes about your lovesick expression." Maya wrinkled her nose, sipping the tea. "He's hinted he'll be back soon, but with his father still stirring up trouble, threatening lawsuits, trying to devalue the company's stock, he can't just drop everything and leave." Sarah nodded, leaning against the counter. "At least you two talk constantly. That's more than I can say for most people in a long-distance thing." Maya shrugged, a trace of uncertainty creeping into her gaze. "I just hope it's enough. Sometimes I wonder if once he's free of corporate headaches, he'll realize he prefers city life after all." But then, one evening, everything changed. It was close to 9 o'clock, and Maya was winding down from a group trek, standing outside her cabin under the star-heavy sky. Her phone buzzed with a call, the screen lighting up with Ethan's name. She answered on the second ring, expecting to hear a tired update about board negotiations. Instead, he simply said, "Could you come to the porch?" Her pulse fluttered. "What do you mean, come to the porch?" She heard a rustling on his end, then a muffled laugh. "Open your door!" Heart thumping, she hit end and hurried to the cabin's entry. She swung open the door to find Ethan standing there in the faint glow of the porch light. He wore hiking boots, a casual jacket, and a grin that managed to convey both apology and triumph. A bag slung over his shoulder and a roll of architectural sketches poking out made her breath hitch. "Surprise," he said softly, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. Maya's lips parted, momentarily speechless. She half expected him to dissolve into a daydream. You're here? How?" He set the bag down, stepping closer, hands hovering near her waist as though asking permission. "Board matters are winding down. My father's still fuming, but the new shareholders are holding steady with me. The minute I got the chance, I caught the first flight out." She blinked rapidly, a smile blooming across her face. "I can't believe you flew in unannounced." He let out a light laugh. "Believe it, I couldn't wait another day. I needed to see you, to really see you, not just on a screen." Before she could respond, he closed the gap and pulled her into a warm, lingering embrace. The sensation of his arms around her, the familiar faint scent of his cologne, hit her with a rush of relief and longing. For a moment, she pressed her face against his shoulder, eyes prickling with happy tears. Eventually, they separated, though he kept her hand in his. "I brought something," he said, nodding at the tube of sketches. "A proposal. For us. Not business exactly, but, well, a bit of both." "May I show you?" Intrigued, Maya led him inside, where he spread out the large sheets on her dining table. Each drawing depicted a small house, sleek lines of glass and wood merging into the natural surroundings. One angle revealed a living area with panoramic windows looking out toward distant peaks. Another highlighted a wraparound porch that seemed to blend into a grove of pines. "I've been working on this for weeks," he explained, voice tinged with excitement and nervousness. "I found a plot of land halfway between Boulder's main roads and your beloved trails. It's still pretty secluded, but close enough for modern utilities. A place that's neither fully urban nor entirely off-grid, like a bridge between our worlds." Maya studied the designs, her heart thumping. She recognized his architectural flair, thoughtful, harmonious with nature, exactly the kind of structure that wouldn't mar the landscape. Each page featured notes on sustainable materials, solar panels, rainwater collection. She looked up, eyes shining. You really did listen all those nights we talked about how I can't leave the mountains, but also need better access to the city. It's perfect. He exhaled, relief washing over his face. I was hoping you'd like it. I'm not trying to rush you into anything. We can tweak the plans or find a different location if you'd prefer. But I wanted you to know I'm serious about building a life here with you. Tears welled in her eyes, and she laughed, a slightly shaky sound. It's beautiful. I don't know what to say. He pressed his forehead gently to hers. Just say we'll figure it out together, one step at a time. She closed her eyes, soaking in his warmth. Even if the challenges before them were far from over, at that moment, everything felt right. Yes, she whispered, we will. 6 months drifted by in a succession of busy days and transformative decisions. The chosen plot of land, nestled in a clearing of pines that overlooked Boulder's rolling foothills, gradually became a construction site. Local carpenters, many of whom Maya had known for years, worked alongside teams sent from Holloway Development's new Green Division. The house of wood and glass took shape, an architectural blend of Ethan's sleek design sensibilities and Maya's devotion to blending seamlessly with the environment. Every morning, Maya rose early to guide her hiking clients through mountain trails. She'd return in the late afternoon to find Ethan on site, laptop perched on a makeshift table while he juggled video calls to New York and spontaneous consultations with the construction crew. Sometimes she'd hear him laugh with the workers over coffee, swapping stories about the region's wildlife or local legends. Her chest tightened with a mix of pride and astonishment. He was truly making this place his second home. Meanwhile, Holloway Developments underwent its own metamorphosis. Alexandra Reeves, now a key ally in the boardroom, championed the Boulder project as a flagship for sustainable real estate. Their pivot garnered cautious praise in financial papers, while environmental journals lauded the company for finally leading by example. That shift didn't happen without friction. Richard Holloway had sold a chunk of his shares in a fit of anger, causing temporary dips in the stock's value. But new investors, impressed by Ethan's vision, stepped in, stabilizing the company. By the time the first snow dusted the half-finished roof of the new house, progress felt tangible. Tall, gleaming windows framed panoramic views of the Rockies, and a solid wooden framework promised a cozy interior. One evening, Maya arrived with takeout burritos, finding Ethan and Daniel Cruz huddled over a blueprint in what would soon be the living room. "Hey," she greeted, setting the food on a beam that served as a makeshift table. "You two look intense. Everything all right?" Daniel, his broad face creasing into a grin, waved her over. "We're just finalizing the schedule for next spring's farm education workshops. Ethan thinks we can integrate day trips for tourists staying at the new eco-lodges." Maya smiled, an excited flutter stirring within her. "That's wonderful. So soon?" Ethan glanced up, a smudge of sawdust across his cheek. "Why not? The site for the farm tours is ready, and Daniel's planting new crops that'll flourish by then. Holloway's new marketing team wants to launch a pilot program that ties in with your mountain tours, too." She nudged him with a playful elbow. "You're unstoppable." He gave a warm laugh, leaning back against the unfinished wall. "You're one to talk. Last I heard, the conservation group you rallied is planning a big summer camp for kids, focusing on wildlife education. You're basically the face of nature awareness in Boulder now." Maya felt her cheeks heat. "I wouldn't go that far, but it's exciting to finally put those plans into action. People are volunteering left and right, like they've been waiting for someone to give them a reason to unite." Daniel excused himself soon after, promising to finalize details next week. Maya and Ethan ate their burritos by the large window frame, which overlooked a meadow dusted in soft moonlight. Although the structure was still incomplete, no furniture, unpainted walls, cables poking out, she could already imagine them living here. Quiet mornings sipping coffee, nights watching storms roll across the sky. Ethan followed her gaze, gently covering her hand with his. "Think it'll feel like home?" he asked, voice hushed. She turned to him, heart swelling. "Yes," she whispered. "It already does, in a way." He looked thoughtful. "I never believed I could be happy away from a big city, but these last months have changed me. Working here, seeing the tangible impact of what we're building, I wake up excited, not dreading another corporate grind." She squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you, not just for the project, but for taking such a big risk." He laughed self-consciously. "Honestly, I haven't felt this alive since my grandmother used to take me to her community garden in the Bronx. She'd say, 'If you nurture the soil, it'll nurture you back.' I guess I forgot that lesson until now." They fell quiet, listening to the rustle of a chilly breeze through pine branches. An owl hooted in the distance, a solitary echo that made the half-constructed walls feel oddly cozy. After finishing their meal, they walked through the skeletal hallways, pointing out where the kitchen counters would be installed, where a small reading nook might fit, and how the south-facing bedroom would catch morning light. Outside, the moon climbed higher, illuminating the roof beams in silver. Each time Maya glanced at Ethan, her chest filled with an almost painful gratitude for the man who'd come to these mountains seeking solitude, only to find purpose and partnership. They exchanged quiet smiles in the half-light, their unspoken hopes weaving together in the hush of the night. Months of steady work led to a blossoming synergy. The new Holloway sustainable approach, Daniel Cruz's revitalized farmland, Sarah's bustling cafe that served as a hub for local collaborations, and Tom Wilson's endorsement of the entire project from an environmental standpoint. Everywhere, tension and excitement coexisted, fueling discussions about progress versus preservation. And through it all, Maya felt her defenses slowly eroding, replaced by a cautious but determined willingness to share her life. Each day with Ethan was another brick laid in the bridge they were building between their two worlds. Sometimes, as she drifted to sleep in her still secluded cabin, she could scarcely believe the transformation. Yet every sunrise brought proof that their vision was real. Wood, glass, and shared dreams forging a brand new horizon. One year after Maya Collins first stumbled upon Ethan Holloway in a blizzard, the snow was falling gently once more, a far cry from the violent tempest that had changed both their lives. This time, the flakes drifted lazily, coating the pines and rooftops in a delicate hush. At the newly completed wooden and glass house perched on the hillside, warm lights glowed through tall windows, beckoning friends and neighbors for a modest housewarming gathering. Inside, a fire crackled in a stone hearth. Maya adjusted a tray of hot cider mugs on the kitchen counter, wearing a soft, contented smile. She glanced around at the open-concept living space, polished wood floors, large windows that offered an uninterrupted view of the Rockies, and thoughtful rustic accents that reminded her of the simpler life she'd once guarded so fiercely. Ethan was across the room, greeting Tom Wilson and Sarah, laughing at some joke Tom made about city folk learning to chop their own firewood. Daniel Cruz arrived next, proudly presenting fresh produce from his newly expanded farm, packaged in neat baskets labeled with the official logo of their educational eco-tour program. "For your table," he said, giving Maya a wink. "And to commemorate the first full year of the partnership, wouldn't you say?" She thanked him, heart swelling with gratitude. Over the past 12 months, so much had changed. for the better. The pilot farm lodge program had welcomed its first wave of visitors, drawn by the promise of immersion in sustainable agriculture and nature treks guided by none other than Maya herself. Word of the project spread, bringing new life to the community. The locals who'd initially been wary realized it wasn't the usual glossy resort takeover, but a genuine effort to preserve and celebrate the region's unique beauty. Ethan, having weathered legal threats from his father and skeptical shareholders, emerged more resolute than ever. Holloway Developments, now co-led by supportive new board members, continued its transformation into a model for eco-friendly real estate. Richard Holloway had retreated from the public eye, focusing on his private investments. Though father and son barely spoke, Ethan never once regretted forging a new path. Maya caught Ethan's eye from across the room, and he excused himself to join her near the kitchen. He leaned down to kiss her cheek, the warmth of him a reassuring presence. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing her pensive expression. She nodded, placing a hand lightly on his chest. "More than okay. I was just thinking about how far we've all come." He followed her gaze to the gathered friends, neighbors, and business partners, a living tapestry of the life they'd built. "All thanks to a snowstorm," he said with a small chuckle. "Funny how the worst weather can sometimes lead to the best outcomes." She laughed, remembering how she'd once dreaded that fateful day, only to find him injured on the trail. "I still get goosebumps thinking about it." They were interrupted by Sarah tapping a spoon against a cider mug. The room quieted as she lifted her voice in playful ceremony. "All right, folks, before we dig into the potluck, I think we owe a few words to this couple who managed to turn a freezing near disaster into a beacon of hope for Boulder." Chuckles rippled through the crowd. Maya felt her cheeks warming, but she smiled as Sarah continued. "Ethan, you shook up our assumptions about big city developers, and Maya, you finally shared that big heart of yours with someone who deserved it. We're proud of what you two created here, a place that bridges city and mountain, business and conservation, skepticism and trust." Sarah raised her mug. "To Maya and Ethan and to the storm that brought them together, may this house be a sanctuary of love, friendship, and plenty of good stories by the fire." A chorus of cheers followed, mugs lifted high. Maya blinked back tears, the gratitude and emotion nearly overwhelming. She glanced at Ethan, who gently pressed his forehead to hers. His eyes shone, echoing her feelings without the need for words. As the gathering dispersed throughout the house, some drifting to admire the panoramic views, others warming themselves by the hearth, Maya stepped out onto the wraparound porch for a moment's quiet. Snow drifted lazily, and the crisp air carried the faint scent of pine. The twinkling lights of Boulder sparkled in the distance, a comforting reminder that her old life and new life could coexist in harmony. A soft sound of footsteps behind her made her turn. Ethan joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. Together they gazed at the snow-blanketed vista, breathing in the tranquility of the night. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. Maya's curiosity piqued. She watched him pull out a small envelope sealed with wax. Her name was written on it in his neat handwriting. "What is it?" she asked, taking the envelope gently. He smiled, a touch of shyness crossing his face. "Open it." Inside was a simple sheet of paper bearing an official letterhead, the newly formed Collins Holloway Environmental Foundation. The text declared Maya as the chairperson, granting her full support and resources to expand education programs, wildlife research, and community outreach in the region. Tears pricked her eyes as she read. This was the formalization of a dream she had once believed lost forever. She looked up, her voice catching. "You set all this up?" Ethan nodded, eyes warm. "You've been working toward this for years, even when you thought no one was paying attention." Now the world can see your vision, and I'll be right here, helping you bring it to life." Gripping the letter, Maya blinked back tears. She recalled the moment she'd found him injured in the snow, how she'd feared letting another person in after past betrayals. Now, on this quiet winter's night, she felt only hope and a powerful sense of belonging. She nestled closer to him, letting the hush of falling snow envelop them. In that serene moment, she recognized the storm had passed, leaving in its wake a landscape forever changed, not just in the mountains, but in her heart. Together, they had forged a home that echoed with promise, rooted in trust, and strong enough to weather whatever storms might come next. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.